maybe intelligence sharing of crime gangs that operate within Belgium. As you say, it's a much further distance, much more perilous across the North Sea. Very unlikely that people will be leaving in any great numbers from Belgium. But nevertheless, is this of note, or is it a token victory against the backdrop of domestic loss?
It's interesting they can do it with Belgium and not do it with the European Union, because so far we've been told the returns agreements can't be agreed with individual countries because they've got the European Union to talk to. Maybe this deal can be mirrored with France, and that might help with better cooperation, because basically after Brexit we're a sovereign country. We have to work on some areas more closely with our European neighbours.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon. It's just coming up to 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We're debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. That's in an hour. Also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. In a few moments' time, we'll be clashing in a head-to-head with GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and businessman and activist Adam Brooks. But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you and good afternoon. It's 3 o'clock. These are your top stories from the GB Newsroom. Warnings against a planned Israeli invasion of the southern Gaza city of Rafah are mounting, with ministers saying it would be catastrophic for civilians. It comes as Israel begins mobilising its troops in preparation for a ground invasion. Earlier, Israeli tanks and bulldozers were seen operating along the Israel-Gaza border. Explosions and smoke from the Israeli ground operation in Khan Yunis could be seen from Rafah as the city awaits a full-scale offensive. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's Prime Minister, says he has a plan to evacuate civilians from the crowded area beforehand. Yesterday, at least 44 people, including several children, died in what the Palestinians claim were Israeli airstrikes. The Defence Secretary is said to be furious over the Ministry of Defence's diversity and inclusivity policy. It's been reported in today's Telegraph that the Army wants to relax security clearance vetting for overseas recruits to boost diversity and inclusion. Grant Shapps told the Sunday Telegraph that he's ready to go to battle over the matter and has ordered a review. He's warned there will be no lowering of security clearance requirements on his watch. According to the paper, the UK's armed forces are looking overseas because they've reportedly failed to hit recruitment targets. Fujitsu is said to have received more than £3.4 billion through contracts from Treasury-linked organisations despite its role in the Post Office scandal. The Commons Treasury Committee says Fujitsu was awarded around £1.4 billion worth of deals since a High Court ruling in 2019, concluding there'd been numerous failings in its Horizon IT system. £2 billion worth of contracts were also agreed before 2019 and remained active thereafter. A group of MPs wrote to organisations, including HMRC, the Financial Conduct Authority and the Bank of England, to demand details of their agreements with Fujitsu. The committee said all three have spent considerable sums with them. 2 people have been arrested after an 8-year-old child was seriously injured in a suspected XL bully attack. The dog had bitten the child's head in Merseyside yesterday afternoon. The boy has had emergency surgery and remains in a serious but stable condition. Doctors say his injuries are life-changing. Officers seized the dog, which they believe to be an XL bully. A 49-year-old woman and a 30-year-old man have been arrested. They're not related to the child. The Housing Secretary is warning young people shut out of the UK's housing market could turn to authoritarianism. Michael Gove says a failure by the government to tackle the housing crisis could harm democracy, as well as the Conservatives' chances at the general election. In an interview with The Times, he says the traditional route for young people to work hard and get on the housing ladder has gone. Gove criticised Labour for, he says, continuously rejecting housing policies.
The difference between a party saying that its policy is pro-builder, not blocker, and then when we bring things forward, every single Conservative MP, every single Conservative I know backed our proposals for new homes, and Labour were whipped to a man and woman against it. So this is not about individuals, this is about a party that makes big claims, and yet, as we see time after time, it turns turtle. And that's why Keir Starmer is the jellyfish of British politics. He's transparent, spineless, swept along by the tide.
124 migrants crossed the English Channel yesterday on three small boats, according to the new Home Office figures. The latest arrivals brings the total for the year to just over 1,500. That's down from 2,072 at the same time last year, but up from the figure in 2022. Apart from the latest crossings, small boats had not been intercepted since January 31st. The Prime Minister has made stopping the boats a key pledge of his leadership as the country approaches a general election. Well, Kwasi Kwarteng says immigration must be a key focus for the government when it comes to having success at the next election. The former Chancellor also told GB News his decision to not stand for re-election as an MP is one he's been considering for a while.
Thinking about it for a long time.
Have you? How long?
And there was, well, ever since the beginning of the Parliament, actually. I had thought, and I was Minister of State at that point, I had thought that, 3 terms, obviously we had more elections, but 15 years is probably, in this modern climate, a reasonable amount of time to be an MP. Two of the principal things that Conservatives should be fighting for are lower taxes and secure borders, strong on immigration and strong on taxes.
Well,
and
would you like to see an immigration cap?
Yes, I mean, there's got to be something on it. I mean, on 2 of those metrics, we haven't, frankly, performed very well.
No.
And the King has attended church in Sandringham for the first time since his cancer diagnosis. His Majesty walked alongside Queen Camilla and waved to well-wishers. Last night, King Charles thanked the nation for their overwhelming support in his first public message since the diagnosis announcement. The monarch said such kind thoughts are the greatest comfort and encouragement. Buckingham Palace has said he's facing a form of cancer unrelated to his recent prostate treatment. For all the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. It's fast approaching 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. Now, before we get stuck into the debates over the next hour, let me introduce you to my clashers. Joining me is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and also businessman and activist Adam Brooks. Right, here's what's coming up today. Was Keir Starmer right? After the controversy at PMQs this week, which I watched, the Prime Minister is continuing to resist calls to apologise for his comments on Keir Starmer's seeming inability to define a woman. Was Starmer right to call for an apology? Then, did you watch it? Tucker Carlson, was that the right thing to do again? He interviewed Putin. Was it true that no Western leaders had really approached Putin and asked him for such an interview? And did that change your thoughts on Putin as the US journalist comes under attack from EU lawmakers? Should he have been interviewing? Should he have been even doing that? Then do you believe that Abdul is in the river? After the whereabouts of the suspected chemical attacker Abdul Azidi are still unknown, do you trust the Met when they say that he fell in the Thames? Seems a bit convenient, but, who knows? Does Rishi need to bring back Boris? Maybe Bojo is the only way the Tory party can be saved. Should Rishi give him a call? And then finally, should we be worried about AI? Amazon is said to remove several books containing false claims about the King's cancer diagnosis after it emerged that they were written by AI. Should we be worried about the potential for misinformation? That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. Now, just in case you don't already know this, but I've got to remind you, you can't miss this. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is going to appear exclusively on GB News on our People's Forum, which is an hour-long question and answer session on issues that matter to you. Let's have a listen to what he has to say.
Hi, Rishi here. As Prime Minister, I'm focused on delivering on your priorities. So I'll be on the road to join GB News for a special People's Forum on Monday the 12th of February, where I'll be taking questions from a live audience about the issues that really matter to you: the economy, immigration, the NHS. See you there.
So Rishi Sunak at an undisclosed location so far at 8 here on GB News. He's going to take part in a special People's Forum. It'll be live from the north-east of England. And over the course of the hour, he'll, of course, take questions directly from you, the great British public. And a vigil, if you just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News. It's just coming up to 10 minutes after 3 o'clock, and a vigil is being held today to mark the anniversary of Brianna Ghey's murder. Brianna was on this day last year murdered by 2 teenagers, having been found who were found guilty in Manchester Crown Court last December. The Prime Minister is continuing to resist calls to apologise for his comments on Keir Starmer's inability to define a woman at Prime Minister's questions this week after he accused the Labour leader of using Brianna's murder to distract from the U-turns. But Keir, as well as Brianna Ghey's father, have called on him to apologise. Have a listen to PMQs.
It's a bit rich, Mr. Speaker, to hear about promises from someone who's broken every single promise he was elected on. I think I counted almost 30 in the last year. Pensions, planning, peerages, public sector pay, tuition fees, childcare, second referendums, defining a woman. Although in fairness, that was only 99% of a U-turn. The list goes on, but the theme is the same, Mr. Speaker. It's empty words, broken promises, and absolutely no plan.
Of all the weeks to say that, when Brianna's mother is in this chamber, shame, parading as a man of integrity when he's got absolutely no responsibility.
Right, well, although the same could be said about him, to be fair. But let's welcome again to my clashes GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, and also Adam Brooks, a businessman and activist. Well, I've got to say, welcome, Adam. It's the first time I've had you on here.
It's good to be here.
I've watched you at a distance and thought, he's got to get on my show.
I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you. Well, shall I start with Adam, seeing as he's the newbie here? Adam, what did you make of all of that?
I think Keir Starmer has seen an opportunity to weaponise Rishi's words. And, his lawyer head's come on and he thought, I'm going to attack him here, like he's in a courtroom. I think it was virtual signalling. I'm surprised he didn't get down on one knee while he said it, to be fair, Keir Starmer. But there's a big point here, is that we should not allow who's in the balcony to influence the chamber and the debates. And I think it's Parliamentary paragraph 2130 that says there should be no reference to people in the balcony. Now, surely Keir Starmer did that. He's broke the MP's code. But the important thing for me is that Rishi Sunak is right to challenge Keir Starmer, because there's a lot of voters that are worried about Labour and Keir Starmer's gender ideology stance. 51% of the voters are women. Now, if he cannot define what a woman is, what hope have we got going forward? What hope I'm a father of 3 kids, 2 daughters. What sort of future is there going to be under a Labour government where the leader, the Prime Minister, hasn't got the balls to determine what a woman is, just in case he offends 0.4% or something of the population? It's my view that no man can become a woman and no boy can become a girl. Now, that's my opinion. So, we can't let emotions of a tragedy, and this is a tragedy. This young person was brutally murdered by monsters, and nothing takes that away. And I would not want to disrespect that in any way. But I cannot call Brianna a girl, because if I was to do that, I would have to call Eddie Izzard a woman. He isn't. So I'm pretty strong on the direction of travel and the calling out of this trans agenda. And I think Rishi Sunak was right. and he's got nothing to apologise for.
Nigel Nelson.
I think Rishi Sunak is a very naive politician who can't think on his feet. I mean, the whole thing is, let's just take away the fact of Brianna's mother being in the Commons at the time. That was bad enough. This was
But listen, you could do that about anything. I mean, what if somebody with a wooden leg is out there and you said something about people with wooden legs? I mean, you can't. Do you know what I mean? You can't.
No, the reason I'm saying that is that this was a horrific murder of a young trans woman which was dominating the public consciousness at the time.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, these are pre-prepared notes that Rishi Sunak made before Prime Minister's questions. The first thing is, he should never have said it. That joke should not have been in there at a time like this. Perfectly reasonable to criticise Keir Starmer for flip-flopping if he wants to. Just leave that bit out.
Why? But why?
Because of a really horrific case, actually, people are thinking about that.
But
don't make a trans joke when a trans girl has been murdered.
But that's an assumption that it is a trans joke. I don't happen to think it's a trans joke. It's a joke at something that Keir Starmer said, which was ludicrous. So it's another U-turn, because Keir later then said that 99.99%,
yes.
You know. So, and then he later then confirmed that actually a woman is an adult human female. So it was a U-turn, and that was the point of it.
That was absolutely the point of it, but but there was also a whole litany of other U-turns that he was going on. Leave that one out.
But why? Why? That's a really important U-turn to me.
Why?
Well, to me,
Nana is a woman.
I'm a woman, and that is another very important U-turn, as equally as important as all of the others. Why is that one not as important as the others?
Well, I mean, you might as well say that you'd make jokes about chemical attacks after the Abdulaziz.
Well, he wasn't. If there was a U-turn about a chemical attack, then you might bring it in, yes.
But not when it is in such bad taste. What I'm saying is that.
But what about me? I don't think it's in bad taste. I'm a woman. That's another very important U-turn that I'm listening to, and I'm quite angry.
But you're against the background of a young trans woman has been murdered. We have a situation where the father of that girl has asked Rishi Sunak to apologise for making this. Yes, for making the statement. He should have apologised immediately.
But emotion should not influence our politicians.
But it does all the time.
At the end of the day, if Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister, it looks like he's going to, and suddenly there is going to be a debate on so-and-so, why not just fill the balcony with people that are going to be offended to try and shut him down? This opens the door and sets a precedent for so many bad things in our Parliament. And I think, you know, again, Keir Starmer's words are still pretty insulting to women. Absolutely. He says 99.9% of women now don't have a penis. No, Keir Starmer, no woman can have a penis. A woman is an adult female.
That's right.
You know? Well, it is the official position in this country that a woman can have a penis.
Well, no,
but they can't.
Well, I mean, whether you like it or not, and clearly you don't, that is the official position of Britain, that a woman, that means a trans woman, can have a penis.
No, it means a trans woman can claim that they're a woman, but it doesn't mean a woman can have a penis. No, those are two very different things.
They are.
A trans woman may want to say they're a woman, and in law they might be allowed to do that, but that doesn't mean that a woman has a penis.
Well, it does under the Gender Recognition Act, which is actually the law which governs this particular area. So what that says is...
So that law supersedes biology?
Well, but it's the law of the land. It is the law of the land passed in 2004.
So what is a woman?
Well, I think that Keir Starmer is right. A woman is an adult female.
So that
doesn't then rule out somebody who is a trans woman. So what I'm saying is that the position in the country at the moment is to change your gender on your birth certificate and on your passport. Your gender recognition certificate, you get that by living for 2 years in your acquired gender, and then having a diagnosis of gender dysphoria and going before a board to decide if all that is in order. Then you can change your gender. So there's nothing about surgery.
I'm going to ask you, Nigel. You're obviously a Labour supporter. Eddie Izzard, is he a man or a woman?
I don't know. I would have to ask. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't think he does. Sometimes he changes.
He uses the women's toilets. Is that right or not?
I think that when it comes to women-only spaces, that is an element that should be protected in the same way that a trans woman cannot compete in women's sport. I understand those things. What we're talking about here is that a woman can have a penis because that's what the law says.
No, it doesn't.
But it does say that.
No, it says
that. Going back to Brianna Ghey, I cannot call that unfortunate victim a girl, because the fact is that person was a boy that identified as a girl. And it's all right, the parents saying, Rishi Sunak's got to apologise, but it's not up to the parents to dictate to our politicians.
Absolutely. Well, listen,
facts.
Well, listen, we've run out of time on that one. Listen, what do you think at home? gbviews@gbnews.com. Should Rishi apologise? We asked that yesterday, or who should apologise? But then was Keir Starmer right to then pursue this and kind of say that Rishi needs to apologise? I don't think he does, but what do you think? gbviews@gbnews.com. Tweet me at GBNews. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, coming up, questions are being raised about trust in police as the manhunt for the suspected alkali killer, Abdul Azidi. Do you believe that he's in the river? What do you think? Up next, though, as EU officials call for sanctions on the American journalist, was Tucker Carlson right to interview Putin?
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you,
sure,
and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, 1 year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 23 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. We're still going on about this woman thing, but what do you think? GBviews at gbnews.com. I will read some of those out. Now, this week, I don't know whether you watched it, Vladimir Putin held a blockbuster interview with the American journalist Tucker Carlson. I think it was over 200 million people watched it. And in the interview, the Russian president says that the invasion was necessary to prevent Ukraine from posing a threat to Russia by joining NATO, and claimed that the war could have been over 18 months ago, but Boris Johnson apparently stopped it. Well, Carlson has faced backlash for his interview with Vladimir Putin, with talk of the EU possibly even sanctioning him. So was he right to do that interview? Well, let's welcome again to my clashers GB News political commentator Nigel Nelson and Adam Brooks, businessman and activist. I'm going to start with you, Nigel Nelson.
First of all, I think if a journalist is offered an interview with a world leader, they should take it.
Yeah.
So I don't think that Tucker Carlson did anything wrong by going for the interview. I'm surprised that the EU thinks this somehow breaches hate laws or whatever. I don't see how that can be the case. However, I wish that that Putin had been interviewed by a better interviewer. It was a terribly rambling interview. Putin made claims that Tucker Carlson didn't contest. He didn't even bring up repression in Russia or war crimes in Ukraine. Those are things that a proper interviewer would have done.
Well, maybe if he had, he would be dead.
Well, in which case, don't go for the interview.
Well, no, you've got to get what you can as a journalist. You're not going to say, oh, no, Vladimir. Vladimir Putin and any world leader will give you restrictions as to what you can and can't ask.
Well, I wouldn't do the interview on the basis of restrictions.
Well, you might get something out of them that I would do what I could.
Come on, Nigel, you would go. You would go and interview.
Not if you're under so many restrictions where you couldn't actually ask the questions. There's no point in doing that. You would have to have some kind of free hand. Now, yes, when you do an interview with a senior politician, we do draw parameters around it.
So what's the difference?
Well, the only difference is that the parameters are usually time constraints. The only real difference is what you are going to ask that person. If I couldn't ask Putin, and I'd been granted the interview about war crimes in Ukraine, you would use his answer, whatever it might be. What is the point of the interview?
What do you think?
Firstly, I'm glad we're out of the EU because I think they're showing their authoritarian side again, with these threats. Look, the shock and horror that a journalist is doing journalist things is quite amusing. The outrage that's been. I'm glad you've sort of got a more sensible approach on that. Many on the left haven't, Nigel. Let's remember, if we go back to the weapons of mass destruction days, imagine someone had gone and interviewed Saddam or the leaders at that time. Maybe we could have averted a war if we'd got a bigger picture, we've got both sides. If we go back to that time, we was all told headlines by every newspaper that there was weapons of mass destruction. Everyone got behind, 90% of the country probably got behind this military action because the papers told us so. Now, this is the danger now, is the newspapers and the BBC and everyone else tell us what we need to believe. And I think COVID sort of opened a lot of people's eyes, especially mine. We cannot just believe what we're told. We have to question things. We have to see both sides. What Tucker's done here is given me an insight more into the thought process of
What do you think you
Putin.
learned from the interview, though?
It's hard to, I learned a lot of Russian history.
Which went on and on for 30 minutes, so we could have done without that bit.
And let's be honest, I am a publican and I'm a normal person. A lot of what he said went over my head, and I'm not gonna lie with that. But it gave me an insight into the sort of person maybe that he is, as to what we're told. He looked more human. We thought, I do not like Putin because I think what he's done in Ukraine is disgusting and the lives that are lost. But we're getting more of a human side to him to maybe understand his thinking.
So it was a successful PR job on Putin's behalf on that basis?
I just think...
Which is what the EU are complaining about, basically.
Firstly, we're not at war with Russia. It doesn't matter what, people try and spin. We are not at war with Russia. This is between Ukraine and Russia at the moment. So, we are not interviewing or he's not interviewing the enemy as such. But look, it could be PR for Putin, but I think it's very it's a learning curve for people, normal people, to see another side. And a lot of what he said, I didn't believe.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. I mean,
a lot of what he did said makes me want to go and learn more about Russia and their history and the conflicts. So I think it's only a good thing. And if it's opened more people's eyes to actually thinking, right, I'm going to search out and try and find both sides here so I can understand, that's a good thing, because we cannot have the Daily Mail, we cannot have the Sun, we cannot have the Guardian tell us what we have to think. And that has been the case over many decades.
But the thing is, I don't know whether the EU have a point at all. I actually thought it was good that we spoke to him, because what he did say, for me, was that he talked about nuclear war and how he saw it as mad, as in mutual assisted destruction. Yeah. Everyone will be... So it sort of disarmed the notion that he is just going to press the button and nuclear, because that's kind of what we've been fed in a way.
The headlines say that.
Was important.
I think it's really important.
So
I think
asked what we'd learned, and that's what I learned.
This is the point. The takeaways from that, the other one was that if Americans actually sent troops to Ukrainian soil, then we could be in a world war. Well, of course we could. In the same way, if Russian troops went onto NATO soil, we would be in a world war. In a sense, those things are a bit obvious. But yes, I mean, but that's why I think you always give these people a chance to say it. I'd love to interview Putin. I'd love to interview Kim Jong-un. There's a whole load of dictators out there who would be on my sort of bucket list of people to go for.
You'd need a translator, though, Nigel.
Well, I probably would, yes, yeah. I think Tucker Carlson needed a translator with Putin.
But again, one thing you just said, it's taken away that fear that there's going to be an immediate nuclear war, which our papers and our media seem to love stoking it out there. My kids are...
Well, the generals have been stoking that up a bit,
but my kids have asked me before, Dad, is there going to be a nuclear war? Because they see it on headlines and that. This maybe have just down that down a bit.
I think it's a good thing. I think what he has done actually is kind of turned the dial down on all of the talk of nuclear war, which could be a trap. I don't know, because he's a master at that. But, that I wanted to hear that part of it. Well, listen, what do you think? GB Views at gbnews.com. This is at GB News. I'm Nana Akua. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio, coming up after several books that were listed for sale, which reported to share exclusive revelations about the King's health that turned out to be nonsense and actually written by AI. Should we be worried about it? But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you very much. 3:30 exactly. The headlines from the GB newsroom. Warnings against a planned Israeli invasion of the southern Gaza city of Rafah are mounting, with ministers here in the UK saying it would be catastrophic for civilians. It comes as Israel begins mobilising its troops, tanks and bulldozers along the Israel-Gaza border this morning. Explosions and smoke from Israeli ground operations in Khan Yunis could also be seen from Rafah as the city awaits a full-scale offensive. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said he has a plan to evacuate civilians from the crowded area beforehand. Yesterday, at least 44 people, including several children, died in what the Palestinians have claimed were Israeli airstrikes. The Defence Secretary has said to be furious over the Ministry of Defence's diversity and inclusion policy. It's been reported in The Telegraph today that the Army wants to relax security clearance vetting for overseas recruits. That's to boost diversity and inclusion. Grant Shapps told the newspaper that he's ready to go to battle over the matter and has ordered a review. He's warned there will be no lowering of security clearance requirements on his watch. It's also reported the UK's armed forces are looking to overseas recruits because they've reportedly failed to hit recruitment targets. 124 migrants crossed the English Channel on Saturday in 3 small boats, according to new Home Office figures. The latest arrivals brings the total for this year to just over 1,500. That's down from 2,000 at this time last year, but up from the figure in 2022. Apart from the latest crossings in small boats, they hadn't been intercepted since January the 31st. The Prime Minister has made stopping the boats a key pledge of his leadership as the country approaches a general election. And the King has attended a service at church in Sandringham this morning for the first time since his cancer diagnosis. His Majesty was seen walking alongside Queen Camilla. Last night, King Charles thanked the nation for their overwhelming support in his first public message since his diagnosis. The monarch said such kind thoughts are of great comfort and encouragement. Buckingham Palace has said he's facing a form of cancer that they say is unrelated to his recent prostate treatment. And for the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen if you're watching on TV, or if you're listening on radio, go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you. Coming up, is Bojo the only man who can say that the Tories, so should Rishi give him a call?
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
The EU rules are trying to choke even that. And I just think, I would join this protest in a heartbeat. And you are right to point out this stuff about them being right-wing. How dare they slate them as right-wing when these are real people whose livelihoods are
remember,
being
a lot of people who work in the farm industry, Malone, get paid very little money.
They get paid.
Agricultural workers are very badly paid.
They get paid nothing, Pierce. And, the profits... I think on Clarkson's Farm I read somewhere that I saw that when you sell it like a sheep's skin, it's 30 pence or something.
Right.
And you say, what?
Yeah.
And so you wonder how they can manage that. And I think after a year, Clarkson made a handful of pounds.
He made like 90 quid profit or something.
In a whole year working.
But Carol makes a really good point, though, doesn't she, Nikki, about this idea that we go to the supermarkets, we shop there, we eat our food, we don't often give it a thing. And the farmers have become so frustrated by this idea that they are not respected.
Absolutely. I mean, they're running what are effectively small businesses, often family businesses that have been passed down through generations. They also tend to know the land and the animals better than anyone else in those areas. I am all for green protests, I'm all for climate change activism, but actually... the only way you can do that is gradually. It's exactly what we've seen with Port Talbot. You can't just go in and say, you're not going to do it anymore this way. You've got to do it this way instead. The Tata Steel thing. Yes, exactly. You've got to do it this way instead. Lots of farmers are on board with protecting the planet, but they can't do it overnight. You've got to give them time. So they're protesting, they're saying no farmers, no food.
When you
it
say
can't
you
get any more
support
obvious.
some of these environmental protests, you're not one of these closet supporters of Just Stop Oil, are you?
I'm not a closet supporter. I think I've been quite open about Just Stop Oil.
No.
I don't like all their methods, but I do like the message.
Any of them.
But I do appreciate the message. But sometimes you've got to do difficult things.
What they're asking for now, those protesters, are unrealistic. What these protesters are asking for is not unrealistic.
No.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. If you just tuned in, where have you been? Well, it's 36 after 3. I'm Nana Akua. And, of course, it's time for The Clash. And up next, there is a continued debate over the whereabouts of suspected Al-Qaeda attacker Abdul Azidi, with his disappearance raising questions about the public trust in the police. Many are saying, how is it that somebody in this day and age, someone who's got half a face, literally one side is, that we can't track down? But, yeah, if you do go through a traffic light or whatever, they've got your car plate, they can speed in, home in and see your face. Police believe that they say he may have entered the Thames, but do you believe Abdul Azidi is, in fact, in the river? Well, let's welcome again to my clashes GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson and also Adam Brooks, businessman and activist. Adam, do you believe he's in the river?
It's hard. I've lost a lot of trust in the Met over various things over the last few years. But what worried me, I was one of the big first big accounts on Twitter that was questioning why they wasn't issuing a description of Abdul. Now, they was asking the public for help in finding him, but we didn't know what he looked like. Now, I think that's unacceptable, and I question why the comms teams or who made that decision not to put his description out.
There was a picture of him, I remember seeing it.
Yeah, but not until many hours later. And they, on Twitter, they was appealing for help and trying to solve the case, but the public didn't know what he looked like. We didn't know who he was, or what. That is ridiculous. Now,
although he had one side of his face burned, so that would have been...
we still didn't know that. They did not issue a description of the man, which it didn't make sense. But what worries me with the Met is that it's very likely that he has gone into the River Thames. But there is this doubt now. You know, they didn't tell us this. Suddenly they're telling us, oh, we were seen on the bridge. We are I think we're the third most CCTV city in the world. So it's quite hard to believe that we don't know exactly where this man is. But I think the last update is that they see him going onto the bridge and not coming off. So I tend to probably lean to the fact that he is in the Thames somewhere now. But I think they did it all wrong. And over the last few weeks, we've been told the Met's going to stop the pro-Palestinian protests. They haven't. We were told recently they was going to arrest people in masks. They haven't. So, you know, please bear with us why we don't believe everything that the Met tells us. I think their comms teams are pretty bad.
Nigel Nelson.
I tend to agree with Adam. I think that all the evidence that we've been able to see points to the fact he ended up in the river. So I'm prepared to believe the police on that. It seems to be inconceivable that somebody with half his face burnt away could be wandering around and nobody would spot him. And that bit of footage that you've just shown, which shows that him going onto the bridge but not coming off the bridge, is a pretty good evidence, circumstantial albeit, that he probably did end up in the Thames. When it comes down to the trust in the police, I think that by drawing that conclusion, we're saying, look, the police have explained their thought processes, it makes sense, therefore we accept that. So I kind of trust what they're saying in the sense that it does make sense. Is where I think Adam's point there was quite good, where if the police stop making sense, that's when we're going to stop trusting them.
It does seem odd, though, that there's no other camera, so that's the only...
But there are black spots with CCTV.
But where's the other camera, though? You wouldn't just have the one there. There must be another one further up that could give a different angle somewhere. Somewhere, there must be another camera.
There's nothing to gain from the Met lying over this, apart from maybe covering some of the mistakes that they've made in the lead up to this. But I don't know why, you know, I read some things on Twitter and that, you know, these conspiracy theories. What have they got from hiding the truth over this man? I think they have made mistakes in the early stages of this investigation, and maybe they're scrambling to try and make themselves look a little bit more professional. That's my view on it. But I think until we find a body, I'm not prepared to 100% believe that this guy is dead.
Yeah, because I don't know. I just feel that it's too quick. They've come to the assumption too quickly, in my view, unless they know more than they're telling us. But then why would they hide what they know when, you know...
And if it does turn out that he is alive, they're going to look so ridiculous and so stupid.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's
the problem I'm having with it. I think they need to investigate a bit more. Quick message to you, Nigel. So David, he said there are only men and women and the in-betweeners, but they are still either man or woman with bits added or bits taken away. End of. Tell Nigel.
Well, thank you, David.
You've been told. Right. What do you think? It's been reported that Boris Johnson expects Rishi Sunak to telephone him or call him personally if he wants to ask for his help campaigning in the general election. It emerged that the Conservative strategist wants to deploy the former Prime Minister on the campaign trail later this year, despite the bad blood between them, with many claiming that Boris is the only man who could perhaps still save the Tories. Do you think anything can save them? No, that's not the question. But does Rishi need to bring Boris back? Did I go to you, Phil? I'll go to you. What do you think?
Again, over the last 4 years, I've either loved Boris or loathed him. But one thing you can't take away from Boris, he's probably the only superstar MP or he's not an MP now, that is around politics.
Yeah.
If Boris walks down the street, hundreds will gather. I'm sorry, but if Rishi did that, hundreds will not gather and follow him down the road. I think it's clear that Rishi and Boris hate each other. And I think Boris is probably right not to like Rishi. He spent a year plotting to sort of take his crown. He even, I think he registered a website for his leadership campaign a year before that happened. So he's obviously very devious, Rishi, in this area. I don't know what Boris gets out of it, because Boris coming back as just some sort of, you know, if they put him in the Lords and put him in the cabinet, that might get a few votes, but it's certainly not going to overturn a 25-point deficit in the polls. I do believe, though, if Boris was somehow installed as Prime Minister again or leader of the Conservatives, it would be a lot closer in a general election. I think it would actually be a battle. You know, it could go either way.
Nigel Nelson.
Well, you can probably guess what I'm going to say. Firstly, no, Rishi should not give Boris Johnson a call. Secondly, I don't think it would help the election very much. Firstly, the two of them can't work together. I mean, Rishi was basically responsible for Boris Johnson's demise, the end of his government. So how the two of them could operate together, they're different personalities, different way of governing. There are too many things far apart. As far as whether he'd actually be an asset on the election campaign, despite all those things, we've got to remember how actually the Boris Johnson government fell. That within 3 days, just before he resigned, 56 ministers and PPSs had quit because they no longer had any confidence in him. That hasn't gone away, that the Parliamentary Party don't have confidence in him. So the idea that he can somehow come back is just a bit of a myth.
Well, I think, do you not think that they were sort of caught on a wave of this Partygate and everything else that surrounded it? Because ultimately, where they are now, I bet they wish they hadn't. I bet they wish they hadn't.
And virtue signalling. Yeah, look at bad man, he's causing us a problem. But at the end of the day, I believe he was only 7 or 8% behind in the polls after...
4%, I think.
Was it?
It was only 4%.
It wasn't that bad, considering they'd been in power for so long. So that shows you quite what an effect Boris did have on the electorate. And again, I will stand by, if for some reason Boris was installed as leader of the Conservative Party, it's a 50-50 in an election straight away, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think he's, you know, I'm warming more to that prospect, if it were to happen, that there would be more people more willing to look to the Tory party. But although you have to admit that it's just the things that they've done, the whole thing is a mess, the constant changing the deck chairs and moving jobs. And
I think the Tory party is finished as an electoral force this time round.
The Conservative Party didn't listen to their voters. They listened to each other and advisers. And I believe the advisers around the Tory party have cost them this election and this poll demise.
Yeah, there's a lot of incompetence thrown in too. I mean, we've got, you know, the cost of living crisis and the fact that this government can't sort out the NHS.
Yeah, but you can't blame the cost of living crisis or the NHS solely on the Tory party, let's be honest.
No, there are factors there, but they haven't sorted out.
Even the Labour Party supported Boris and the Tories in all their goals with regard to the pandemic. And in fact, during the pandemic, they wanted more. Lockdowns longer, harder, everything more. So we would be in an even bigger crisis. So, and they all acted as one, so they had a united...
Well, it was a national emergency, and they should do that.
Well, I'm glad you said that, then, so that you admit that you can't really blame Boris for the cost of living crisis that has emerged as a result of it.
Well, I mean, the cost of living crisis is not just about COVID. It's partly about the war in Ukraine. What is happening in the Middle East now doesn't help. So, no, I mean, I do understand government is not totally responsible for the mess we're in. This government is not doing enough to get us out of it.
Well, I would agree with that, but then I think they have resistance from unions who have literally collaborated to ensure that they get rid of the Tories. The PCS union, was it Mark Sawatzka, the head of it? He's even said that, yes, we will do everything we can to get rid of the Tories. What do you think? GBnews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBnews. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. What do you think? Get in touch by the usual means. Coming up, Amazon was forced to remove books on the King's Health written by AI. Should we be worried about artificial intelligence? But first, let's go for a break.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show. Sunday mornings from 9:30.
We had Grant Shapps on last week. He was talking about how defence spending is now creeping up to 2.25% of GDP. Ben Wallace's predecessor suggested it should be 3%. We hear that we've got the smallest army, I think, since the Napoleonic Wars. Numbers are down. There's a question as to whether we can staff frigates in the Red Sea. Why haven't we sent aircraft carriers? What's your impression of the situation?
Well, I don't think it matters how much you spend, it's how effectively you spend it. And we spend it very ineffectively. We have lots of scandals about defence spending. And I think partly because of the monopoly position of some of our defence suppliers, we don't get good value and we don't get reliability. This latest story in the Telegraph is that HMS Diamond, which is our ship, which is out there defending the Red Sea, doesn't have the capability of firing a missile from the ship to the land, so it can't participate in the attacks on the Houthis. So in order that we can participate in the attacks, we're flying RAF aircraft from Cyprus, which is a very long way away. When I was Defence Secretary, I ordered cruise missiles for our nuclear-powered, but not nuclear-armed submarines. And I think we have 6 or possibly 7 of those. But last autumn, it was reported that 5 of those were out of commission, were not available. We have about 21 aggressive surface ships. So we've got 2 aircraft carriers, then we've got frigates, and we've got destroyers. But at any one time, you can count on about half of those not being available because they're under refit or whatever. So we have a minimal surface fleet now. And for whatever reason, it doesn't seem that we're able to deploy a submarine to the area that can fire cruise missiles. Our 2 aircraft carriers, built at enormous expense, are sitting in Portsmouth.
Which seems to most people ludicrous,
well,
at least with what's going on.
It doesn't seem ludicrous to me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens with our team of dedicated journalists across the UK. We're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Fast approaching 51 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, Amazon have removed several books from sale after concerns were raised that they contain false information about the King's cancer diagnosis. Several books were listed for sale, which were reported to share exclusive revelations about his health and were said to be written by AI with misinformation. Should we all be worried? Nigel Nelson, welcome again to my classes. Nigel Nelson, GB News senior political commentator, and also Adam Brooks, businessman and activist. Nigel Nelson, should we be
Yes, we should.
Really?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the way things are moving, big tech companies, I mean, Amazon in this case, but it applies to Google, Facebook, they are the biggest danger to free speech at the moment that I can think of. So in this case, here you are, AI is creating books with no basis in fact at all, and there will be people out there who will believe them. The same way that Google and Facebook use algorithms to use stories from news websites and then promote them, but they decide what stories should be promoted and what shouldn't. And then you've got these bubble filters, which means that you, if you like something, you'll get fed more of it, but what you won't get is opinions you might disagree with. So you're suddenly in this kind of vacuum where you're looking down just at the opinions that you go along with, and that's bad for politics, bad for democracy. You ought to be challenged, you ought to look at alternative arguments, as we do here.
Well, I mean, look, but AI didn't get itself together and decide to do this. Somebody did this.
Well, someone pressed the button and said, go and create it.
It's good that you made that point, because a lot of the people that feed the information into AI and these tech companies are very left-leaning, Nigel. So Elon Musk has brought this up before, the danger of AI suddenly becoming this all fountain of knowledge, but it's going to feed our kids and us sort of lefty information and lefty agendas.
Whether it's left or right, if it's wrong, it shouldn't be there.
But it's going to be lefty agendas, so it's going to be dangerous anyway, whatever way it is. What also worries me about AI is, I've seen on Twitter, certain celebs in very compromising positions in photos. It's not them, it's AI generated. We see it with the Gaza conflict as well, where these pictures of kids in rubble that were actually AI generated and went round to millions of people on the internet. So AI can be used very effectively for propaganda, and I think it's going to be a very dangerous tool. The next war could be sort of won and lost via AI with the propaganda on the internet. I mean, another thing about AI is the kids doing their homework on AI as well.
Oh, well, that's a good thing. It's not a good thing. Well, listen, if no one can tell the difference, I don't know. If I was a kid, would I do it? I think I probably might try. I used other means to get people to do stuff for me. Use your imagination, but keep it clean. Well, listen, some of you have been getting your messages, and thank you so much. Peter, on to Keir Starmer, said Keir Starmer was wrong to use that poor effeminate boy's murder to score a couple of cheap cheers in the Commons, just as Rishi Sunak was wrong to call him out for being so woke. They're both on the election trail, so I think we're going to be bombarded with you said this and he said that. Just hope the voting public can see beyond these clowns. Yeah, but they are the only clowns, sadly. Chloe says, I have no trust left in our police, and therefore I don't believe that he is in the river. Yeah, I'm struggling to get to grips with that too. And Sam says, I think we must have trust in the Met. He is, of course, in the river. They have done so much searching, they would have found out if he wasn't by now. Really, do you think? Well, listen, thank you for your thoughts. Keep them coming. I've got to say thank you very much, my head-to-headers, Nigel Nelson and also Adam Brooks. They will be back for the next half hour. But on the way, my monologue on Sir Keir Starmer and mass strikes. The fabulous Christine Hamilton and Danny Kelly will be here. But first, it's the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. This morning's cloud, mist and fog is slowly clearing its way off to provide more in the way of sunnier spells for the rest of the afternoon and even into the next few days. Still got some quite persistent rain across the Northern Isles, a very wet end to Sunday for Shetland, and also some quite frequent showers for parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, turning wintry over higher ground areas throughout tonight. But elsewhere there are some clear spells in between those showers. Underneath those clear skies, though, temperatures will take a little bit of a tumble down into low single figures for many of us. A patchy frost in rural spots, maybe some icy stretches around first thing in the morning. But generally Monday is a day of sunshine and showers. Those showers will be most frequent over towards the north and west with some quite blustery winds around at times. Those towards the east and the south, though, more likely to stay drier and actually a fairly pleasant, fine day with a decent number of sunny intervals in there. Temperatures generally ranging between 6 and 10 degrees Celsius, which is around where we'd expect them to be for this point in the year. On Tuesday, we still have this area of low pressure in the far north, bringing again a breezy, blustery picture with some showers. But this ridge of high pressure elsewhere will allow for a slightly finer, drier start with some sunny spells once again. But really, all eyes will be turning to this area in the southwest as we see cloud thicken and outbreaks of rain eventually arrive throughout the day. And that will increasingly spread further to other areas of the UK as we head throughout the middle point of the week. But also some milder air trapped into that. So temperatures are generally going to be on an upwards climb. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
(2024), a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Before we get started, let's get your latest news.
Nana, thank you very much. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 4 o'clock. Leading the news this afternoon, we've heard that US President Joe Biden will speak to Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss a planned Israeli invasion in the southern Gaza city of Rafah, after previously describing it as over the top. It comes as Israel begins mobilising its troops in preparation for that ground invasion. Earlier, Israeli tanks and bulldozers were seen operating along the border with Gaza. You can see here on the screen explosions and smoke from the Israeli ground operation currently taking place in the nearby Khan Yunis area. That could be seen from Rafah as the city awaits the full-scale invasion. Benjamin Netanyahu, though, says that he does have a plan to evacuate civilians from the crowded area. Yesterday, at least 44 people, including several children, died in what the Palestinians claim were Israeli airstrikes. The Defence Secretary has said today that he is furious over the Ministry of Defence's diversity and inclusion policy. It's been reported in today's Telegraph that the Army wants to relax security clearance vetting for overseas recruits to boost diversity and inclusion. Grant Shapps told the Sunday Telegraph that he's ready to go to battle over the matter and that he's ordered a review. He's warned there will be no lowering of security clearance requirements on his watch. According to the paper, the UK's armed forces are also looking overseas because they've reportedly failed to hit their recruitment targets. Two people have been arrested after an 8-year-old child was seriously injured in a suspected XL bully attack. The dog had bitten the child's head in Merseyside yesterday afternoon. He's had emergency surgery and we understand remains in a serious but stable condition. Doctors say his injuries are life-changing. Officers have seized the dog, which they believe to be an XL bully. A 49-year-old woman and a 30-year-old man have been arrested, though they are not related to the child. The Housing Secretary is warning that young people are being shut out of the UK's housing market and it could turn to authoritarianism. Michael Gove says a failure by the government to tackle the housing crisis could harm democracy, as well as the Conservatives' chance at the general election. In an interview with The Times, he says the traditional route for young people to work hard and get on the housing ladder has now gone. Gove criticised Labour for, he says, continuously rejecting housing policies.
The difference between a party saying that its policy is pro-builder, not blocker, and then when we bring things forward, every single Conservative MP, every single Conservative I know backed our proposals for new homes, and Labour were whipped to a man and woman against it. So this is not about individuals, this is about a party that makes big claims, and yet, as we see time after time, it turns turtle. And that's why Keir Starmer is the jellyfish of British politics. He's transparent, spineless, swept along by the tide.
Well, in other news, 124 migrants crossed the English Channel yesterday on 3 small boats, according to new figures. The latest arrivals bring the total for the year to just over 1,500. That's down from 2,072 at the same time last year, but up from the figure in 2022. Apart from the latest crossings, small boats had not been intercepted since January the 31st. The Prime Minister has made stopping the boats a key pledge of his leadership as the country approaches the upcoming general election. The departure of the Royal Navy aircraft carrier, HMS Prince of Wales, has been cancelled this afternoon at the last minute. It was about to set sail to replace its sister ship, which was also forced to cancel its deployment due to an issue with its propeller. The £3 billion vessel was set to take over leading the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. However, despite people lining the walls of Portsmouth Harbour to watch the 65,000-tonne warship, it failed to leave the jetty. And the King has attended church in Sandringham this morning for the first time since his cancer diagnosis. His Majesty was seen walking alongside Queen Camilla, and last night King Charles thanked the nation for their overwhelming support in his first public message since the diagnosis announcement. The monarch said that kind thoughts are great comfort and encouragement to him. Buckingham Palace have said he's facing a form of cancer, though they say it's unrelated to his recent prostate treatment. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 6 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. I like to call this one a taste of things to come, a rock and a hard place. Now, I'm no fan of Rishi Sunak and the Conservative Party. I admit to voting for them because, frankly, Jeremy Corbyn simply wasn't an option. I thought Boris was hounded out of office in an unsavoury manner, a leader who gave them an 80-seat majority. Their treatment of his predecessor, Liz Truss, was abhorrent. The Parliamentary Party unceremoniously dumped her for Rishi, a move which appeared premeditated, and they've shuffled the ministers around like a carousel. Frankly, it's embarrassing. It would also be fair to point out that they've had a pretty unfortunate run of circumstance over the last few years. While giving the country a referendum on Brexit was of their own making, and I believe was the right thing to call, they've had a global pandemic, which arguably bankrupted the country, causing a cost of living crisis and rising inflation, which was exacerbated by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the latter the breadbasket of the world, the former an oil-rich nation, which meant that the cost of food and fuel rocketed. And now we're dealing with a conflict in Gaza. In between all of that, we've had strike galore, as many try and pin their wages to the rising prices, and others jump on a bandwagon to finally finish the Tories off for good, although, to be fair, they don't need anyone's help for that. Then there's the Labour Party, a party whose leader, Sir Keir Starmer, struggled to define something as basic as a woman. Not yet at the seat of power, he's earned himself the nickname Flip-Flop, even from those who support him, because when he does eventually give us a policy, he rolls back on it. The most recent, a £28 billion one on green energy. And now his party have promised to give trade unions even more power, despite the fact that the country has been gripped by strikes, mainly by public sector workers. That's teachers, doctors, nurses, rail workers. Well, you know, you've been living through it as well. And at the end of this month, we have another doctor strike. We've just had to increase the pay of consultants who are earning over 100 grand because their wage has not gone up with inflation. Welcome to the real world. Honestly, I mean, whose wage is guaranteed to go up with inflation in the private sector? We have to fight for our pay rises or get another job. And apparently, Keir Starmer, this is the latest, within his first 100 days wants to tear up the laws that rein in the power of union chiefs. And he wants to bin the new laws for minimum service levels for schools and hospitals and railways. The hard left, who dominate these unions, have huge collective bargaining power and can bring this country to its knees, ordering workers to down tools. So the dark days of mass strikes could be back again. God help us. So before we get stuck into the debate, here's what else is coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is diversity and inclusion destroying our armed forces? And that is as the British Army wants to relax security checks for recruits from overseas to boost diversity and inclusion. But is the relentless drive for this inclusion a danger to the UK security? Then at 4:50, it's Worldview. We'll cross live to Los Angeles with Paul Dudridge, host of the Politics People podcast, to get the latest on the race for the White House as the battle between Joe Biden and Donald Trump heats up. At 5, it's this week's Outside. Now, my guest, he's a mystery. He's a barrister and a former champion boxer. Any guesses? That's coming up in the next hour. Tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. Now, before I welcome my panel, again, you don't want to miss this. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is going to appear exclusively here on GB News in our People's Forum. It's an hour-long Q&A on the issues that matter to you. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, Rishi here. As Prime Minister, I'm focused on delivering on your priorities. So I'll be on the road to join GB News for a special People's Forum on Monday the 12th of February, where I'll be taking questions from a live audience about the issues that really matter to you: the economy, immigration, the NHS. See you there.
That's right. So there you have it. That's tomorrow at 8 p.m. The Prime Minister will be part of a special People's Forum live on GB News, but that will take place in the northeast of England. And over the course of the hour, he'll also take questions directly from you, the great British public. So get your questions ready for him. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Right, I'm going to start with you, Christine Hamilton. What do you think? The dark days are striking. I mean, look, if they get into power, everyone's saying they will. He's flip-flopped many times. I'm not saying he's better. I don't say he's worse. I'm just saying, is that worse than what we've already been through?
Yes. I mean, I'm zero enthusiasm for the Tories, but I've even zero enthusiasm for Labour. But if anything, I would have thought this would put people off voting Labour. People who are on the borderline, and those are the people who both of them have got to attract. Both the Tories and Labour have got to attract the marginal voters, not the ones who are already in their camps. And I would have thought anyone who was thinking, well, actually, let's give Labour a go, it would take us right back to the 1970s when it was beer and sandwiches in Number 10. And, you know, anyone of an age will remember the union bosses used to turn up and they were welcomed in by Harold Wilson, etc. And they laid the law down and they said, this is what's going to do. And the government complied. We will get back to that. So I don't welcome it, but I think it may just help to put a few people off voting Labour, and thank goodness for that.
What do you think, Danny Kelly? This is his latest one, so to give the unions back the power that has been taken away from them for the minimum service
Christine's
level.
just added a new dimension to the whole story that basically questions whether it's true, because I can't believe that he would go so militant. so soon to an
It's in
election.
the papers. It must be true.
Well, it was in
It's
the
been
Sun.
leaked.
The Sun it's been leaked, but
It's
in the Sun.
been leaked, but I just wonder whether it in detail is 100% correct. Tony Blair's success was that he managed to sort of manage a bit of socialism with a lot of capitalism. In 1978-79, we had the Winter of Discontent, I think it was called. I don't know why I'm coming to you for this, because you would have remembered it more.
I am old enough to remember
OK,
it.
sorry, that was Freudian, that was.
The
I'm so
bodies
sorry.
of the dead were piled up.
That's right, in the northwest and the northeast.
Terrible.
People weren't being buried.
Yeah.
And that was a Labour government. So people mustn't be fooled that if there's a Labour government, the unions aren't going to try and kick him and try and screw him for every penny. Don't forget that the Labour Party is in the pockets of many unions.
Well,
that's where they get millions of pounds worth of donations.
But that's the point you've just made. So that's why I do believe that this is true, because, you know, they give a lot of money to the Labour Party, and they are what the Labour Party was built from. So I would be very concerned about that, actually, because especially somebody who's in the private sector, because most of these unions that are super powerful are covering jobs within the public sector.
I think it's a vote loser. I don't think it's a vote winner. Anyone who's on the margins, I think it's a vote loser. I go back to Tony Blair's success. People on the hard left of the party, the Labour Party, when Tony Blair won in 1997, I think, they were saying basically he's a red Tory. He's just a Tory. He's a blue Tory, but he's wearing red. And that was the success. So people on the hard left hated Tony Blair because he wasn't left enough. But Tony Blair had 3 times in office, didn't he?
And he offered what people then wanted. He harnessed all the best bits of Margaret Thatcher. Let's just overlook the disastrous John Major. Harnessed all the best bits of Thatcher and yet pushed them forward with his own blend of Blairism, which is what people wanted. He was a candidate for change, and I don't see that Starmer has... This is what people want. They want change, don't they? I mean, look, we're all fed up to the back teeth with this flower of despond that we're all ploughing through at the moment. But I don't see Starmer offering that, and I certainly don't see this being a good flagship policy. But you're absolutely right. Where are all the strikes? They are all in the public sector. Private sector doesn't go on strike. They can't.
Oh, no, Rolls-Royce went on strike a number of years ago. They got a massive pay increase. That's a private sector employer.
One example.
Well, it is. It's just one on the top of my head.
But the thing is, as well, and if they do go on strike, that's fine. But the bottom line is they are not intrinsic to the runnings of this country at the very root of it, like, say, the NHS or, say, the teachers or the railway, because you could argue are private employees, but they're not really, in a way, because it's all part of the public purse. It's all this...
It's an unholy mix on the railways, isn't it? It doesn't
ultimately,
work.
a lot of it, they can take the power of the public sector element of it and also hold us to ransom, which is what they've all been doing. And there's more doctor strikes coming. The consultants were able to strike. They were on over £100,000, and they said because it's not gone up with inflation. My question was, whose wage goes up
who
with
in the private sector?
And if you want it to go up with inflation, you have to sit down with your boss and demand the pay rise. And good luck, you know.
I think all these strikes, if they continue throughout the summer, they will play into the Tories' hands, because people will associate Labour with supporting the strikes. Well, they do. What would the Labour MPs have?
So why would Starmer shoot himself in the foot then with the leaking of this potential policy?
Well,
that's what I don't understand.
Maybe he thinks there's more people who are... You know, the public sector is a massive sector. But if they all support him, then he's...
I think we live in a small C Conservative country.
We do. Oh, definitely, yeah. The facts of life are small C Conservative too.
Yeah. So I think if this is true, he's shooting himself in the foot, which makes me question the veracity of it.
But he does this all the time, though, doesn't he? There's all these policies. I mean, the green energy policy was a machine gun to both feet at the same time, wasn't it? Bang, 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 28 million, billion, bang, bang, bang. I mean, that's just madness.
It is extraordinary. I mean, this nickname flip-flop, which I think was originally coined by GB News, it is. It's what he does the whole time. He keeps... You know, he sticks his finger up in the wind and sees which way it's blowing, and then whoosh, off he goes.
So that's my concern. Not that I'm saying the Conservatives have held themselves in any high regard. If you look at the way they've behaved, I just, you know, it's laughable. You know, the 5 families. Can anyone name the 5 families? I'll give you a special treat if you get that.
I can name the 5 crime families from America, from New York.
No, the 5
Gambinos, the Lucchese's.
There's the Popcons or the Con-Pops, whatever they're called.
Is that 6th family? I thought it was a new one.
I don't know what they are. It's absurd. They're like a circular firing squad, the Tory party, and that's all... Well, they are. They're all shooting at each other.
And people used to go out on strike if they ran out of milk, if there was no milk in the fridge, or they'd ran out of sugar for their tea break. They'd say, right, lads, down tools. There's no milk. Management haven't got any sugar. Down tools.
Where was that?
In Birmingham, Longbridge, the Rover plant. Really? Red Robbo. Yeah, Google it. Red Robbo.
Wow.
Like he was left to Stalin.
The best thing about strikes with I'm All Right, Jack. Absolutely brilliant film starring Peter Sellers and goodness knows who as Fred Kite, I think his name was, a union leader. It's brilliant. I'm All Right, Jack. Check it out, guys.
Oh, well, that's a good one. I'm going to definitely watch it.
Very old, black and white.
Yeah, we love that. Listen, if you just tuned in, welcome. 17 minutes after 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Don't forget, you can also stream the show live on YouTube. But coming up, it's Worldview. I'll be crossing live to Los Angeles and also to get the latest from what's going on in the US. But next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is diversity and inclusion destroying our armed forces? As ever, send me your thoughts. Email gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GBNews. That is on the way.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Claire, you want to talk by cars growing by a couple of centimetres a year?
Yeah, well, 1 centimetre every 2 years.
Okay.
It's unrelenting because the people are so fixated on the big SUVs. The sales have gone through the roof, and yet it's James Nix, the analyst for Transport and Environment campaign, said the author of the report on the trend said, spurred on by sales of the largest SUVs, vehicles are getting wider every year. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, it means that our roads weren't...
comfortable ride, beautiful engines, smooth. I mean, it's luxury, it's gorgeous.
Well, as I know, I used to have two, but I don't...
You used to have 2 SUVs?
Well, one SUV at a time, but I had 2 brands of them. But I'd no longer drive in London now because I just don't see the point, because of the ULEZ, because of the, you know, you can run down a thing and get fined.
Parking spaces, whatever.
Yeah, the growth in car size also causes issues for their drivers. The report found that largely luxury SUVs, which are about 2 metres wide, no longer fit in off-street parking.
That's true.
They also leave too little space for passengers to get in and out of the vehicles in typical off-street spaces, and they're about 2.4 metres wide, the report found. And I'll tell you, I was stuck in a bus last night trying to get home, and the buses couldn't move because the streets were too crammed with all of these massive cars either side.
Chelsea tractors.
And it was gridlocked.
Yeah, but maybe they're not the problem, maybe the buses are the problem.
The buses take people to their place of work and get
I'd
them
like
home.
to know when, because when I go through London, all I see is empty buses.
Oh, you're lucky. Every time I'm on one, they're full.
Well, they're obviously only full at rush hour. You see, the thing is, property developers, when they do high-rise car parks or, you know, they build a multiplex cinema and there's a car park attached to it, that's not my fault that I can't fit into their space. It's their fault. So
well, it's all driven by money, isn't it? The more spaces that they have,
exactly.
the more people they can get.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Remember, you can download the GB News app. It is completely free, and you can find out what's going on here on the channel. But it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is diversity and inclusion destroying our armed forces? A leaked document has revealed that the British Army want to relax security checks. I mean, what are they talking about for potential recruits from overseas in order to boost diversity and inclusion. I mean, this is like the police force thing, isn't it? When they, you know, the vetting of the police officers, it really hasn't gone well. But now the armed forces, Britain's armed forces actually have consistently failed to hit recruitment targets over the past decade, and they're seeking to plug those gaps by increasing ethnic minority representation, which currently stands at about 14% of the regular army, which I think also is about the percentage of ethnic minorities there are in the UK. I think it's 14%. However, the revelations have sparked strong criticism with the former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, saying that the fighting capability of our armed forces mustn't be compromised by the over-application of diversity and inclusion. Meanwhile, Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is said to be furious at the findings and has ordered a root and branch review of diversity and inclusion policies in the armed forces in response. So, for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, is diversity and inclusion destroying our armed forces? Well, joining me to discuss, senior GB News political commentator Nigel Nelson, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, former British Army officer Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, and assistant editor of the London Financial, Andy MacDonald. Right, well, I'm going to start with you, Lieutenant Colonel Crawford. He's a defence analyst and former British Army officer. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, my first thought is that inclusion and diversity should enhance Britain's armed forces rather than denigrate them in any way. The problem is that we're not talking about proportionality in the way that it should be understood, because if we were truly to represent, the armed forces were truly to represent the makeup of the United Kingdom, the population from which it recruits, then 52% of the armed forces would be women, and they're not. And now you can put that down to a lot of things. Equality of opportunity to apply, it definitely applies, but also it's a matter of choice. And as for reducing the security requirements for people coming from overseas, I think that is a route to madness. Because the last thing you want to know, you want is, if you're in the front line, to be wondering whether the guy or girl standing next to you has actually got your best interests at heart, or is indeed an agent for another organisation which would do you harm.
It's just, I'm with you on that. A route to absolute madness. Andy MacDonald, what do you think?
I don't think it's, diversity and inclusion that has destroyed the armed forces in this country. I think it's, the procurement process of how they dish out private contracts for equipment, for supplies and other things like that. That's what's destroying the armed forces. And the fact that we've got a clown at the top of it, the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps. He's been, he was Home Secretary, then Transport Secretary, then Business Secretary, then Energy Security Secretary. And this is only, over the last, I think, 6 years he's had all these jobs. So clearly he's not specialised in defence, so why have we got this guy? He's a far cry from Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary, who was agreed cross-party that he was a great Defence Secretary. So, he's a far cry. So we've got a clown at the top and a procurement process that doesn't really work. I don't think this is about diversity and inclusion. This is about a failed Conservative government who have failed the procurement process and don't have a great Defence Secretary.
There's a carousel, isn't it? I mean, they're all whizzing around. Oh, I'll do this one, I'll do that one. What did you do before you did? I don't even think they know. But that's not the question, though. Do you think, though, but diversity and inclusion, though, Adam Brooks, diversity and inclusion, should they be loosening their sort of requirements so that they can get more people of diverse backgrounds?
Definitely not. This woke agenda, as you said, it's weakened the police. When in the 80s, when I was a child, I used to look at police officers and they were 6 foot tall, big, strong, and they were quite intimidating. Now you look at the police officers today, a lot of them, you'd laugh if they run at you. Some of them can't even run themselves. So we've got to be very careful here. There's a shortage of soldiers. We could have less than 70,000 in 2 years. And we've had a top American general say that our army isn't what it used to be. So there's a crisis of numbers here. But there's so many factors. This generation coming through, they don't want to get their hands dirty, a lot of them. They don't want to fight for a country. A lot of them don't even like this country. Oh. So we're going to have, it's a job on our hands to try and get some of these people into the army. I would say maybe increase the salary to try and do it. But I certainly wouldn't want to fight next to someone that is picked just because, on a diversity box-ticking exercise, and hope that he's going to shield me, when a load of bullets come over my head. It's scary.
Well, it's also kind of deterring white people from coming to the army, because they'll be thinking, well, you know, if there was a time when they weren't looking for white people to apply for jobs in the Navy, and it's just nonsense, or in the Air Force. And as far as you say about young people, they're too busy on TikTok. I know my daughter is. She's like, it's my latest TikTok dance, and I'm like, that's just nonsense. Nigel Nelson, maybe you will support the notion of...
Well, I would certainly support the notion of diversity and inclusion in any organisation, and that includes the Army. The Army have a choice of British citizens, Commonwealth citizens, Irish citizens, and Gurkhas. So there is actually plenty of diversity there. However, I am against any idea that you might boost it by lowering security checks. That does seem to be complete madness. MI5 desperately need Arabic speakers to monitor terrorist chatter over the internet. Now, dual nationals are able to apply to MI5, but you wouldn't expect the place that actually looks after all Britain's secrets to reduce their security checks to get more of them in.
Yeah, Andy, your thoughts there, because, you know, we need more people to join the armed forces. And this is probably an attempt to sort of encourage people from all over the world. They're talking about going to other countries to recruit people. And we do that with other jobs, so why not the Army?
I think in the Army, you know, if you're a member of the Commonwealth, you can apply. I mean, we've got some great international regiments, like you said, the Gurkhas. But I think, from what I understand, this level of vetting, you're still going to be vetted to join the intelligence corps in the Army. It's just a slightly less developed level to make it slightly easier for foreign applicants to apply, from what I understand. But, you know, there's a manpower crisis in the Army, and they've got to figure out how to fix it some way. So, I mean, I don't have any better ideas than them.
But but to me, to fix the crisis doesn't mean to lower the criteria, to make it worse. So you're bringing in people who aren't that experienced or aren't really the right kind of people to fight in the Army. You're just lowering it because we're going to excuse that. And that, I mean, as Adam pointed out, and I did, you know, the police is an exact example of why that doesn't work.
Well, no, I disagree. I mean, you know, Adam spoke about the police in the 80s. You know, the police were still, you know, beating the life out of miners in the 80s. They weren't perfect then, they're not perfect now. You know, the Army had problems in the 80s just like the police did, so it's hard to compare.
Crime's got a lot worse, unfortunately. And just going back to Nana about the security risk here, just remember, only last week I spoke about on this show, an asylum seeker was caught out as being a spy. So do we trust the powers that be now in this country to actually vet these people and realise, you were saying, Nigel, about getting Arabic speakers to help out the Army. How do we know their intentions? You know, so there's so many security risks here. And again, I think the only way you're going to get more recruits into the Army is if you pay them a hell of a lot more than they're paid now, and people start thinking with their wallets rather than their heads. But I think this generation now is lost. They're too soft.
Final word to you, Stuart.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid the root of the problem is not just recruiting, but it's also retention. And I think your other contributors are quite right. To sort this out, we need to pay people better, give them better conditions of service, and I include in that service accommodation where it's required, which has got an awful press at the moment, and rightly so. And then think outside the box. At the moment, lots of recruiting is outsourced to save money to a large multinational company, which I won't mention by name, but I think everybody knows who it is. And they're doing a rotten job. So the announcement this afternoon by Grant Shapps that he's going to do a root and branch investigation into all of this can only be welcomed.
Yeah. All right, so finally, to each of you, and very quickly, Nigel Nelson, is diversity inclusion destroying our armed forces, yes or no?
No.
Adam Brooks, yes or no?
Yes, it is.
Andy, yes or no?
No.
And Stuart, yes or no?
Yes, it is, I'm afraid.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for your thoughts. GBNews senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, Adam Brooks, businessman and activist, Andy MacDonald, political commentator, and also Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Crawford, defence analyst and former British Army officer. Thank you for your thoughts. Right, well, this is GBNews on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, it's the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, is diversity and inclusion destroying our armed forces? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, broadcaster and journalist Annie Kelly, and author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Still to come, my outside guest is a mystery. He's a barrister, a former champion boxer. He's also just written a new book that some are calling the British Jack Reacher. Do you know who he is? GBViews at gbnews.com. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you very much. It's just gone 4:30. The headlines this hour. US President Joe Biden, we expect, will be speaking to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu later to discuss a planned Israeli invasion of the southern Gaza city of Rafah, after previously describing it as over the top. It comes as Israel has begun mobilising its troops in preparation for that ground invasion. Earlier, we saw Israeli tanks, bulldozers and troops on the border with Gaza. Explosions and smoke from the Israeli ground operation in the nearby Khan Yunis area could also be seen from Rafah as the city awaits a full-scale offensive. Benjamin Netanyahu, though, has said that he does have a plan to evacuate civilians from the crowded area beforehand. It comes as at least 44 people yesterday, including several children, died in what the Palestinians have claimed were Israeli airstrikes. Here in the UK, 124 migrants crossed the English Channel yesterday on 3 small boats. That's according to new figures from the Home Office. The latest arrivals brings the total for this year to just over 1,500. That's down from just over 2,000 at the same time last year, but up on the figure from 2022. Apart from the latest crossings, small boats hadn't been intercepted since January the 31st. The Prime Minister has made stopping the boats a key pledge of his leadership as the country approaches the upcoming general election. There's been another setback for the aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales. Its departure has been cancelled this afternoon at the last minute. It was about to set sail to replace its sister ship, which was also forced to cancel its deployment due to an issue with the propeller. The £3 billion vessel was to take over leading the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. However, despite people lining the walls of Portsmouth Harbour earlier to watch the 65,000-tonne warship, it failed to leave the jetty. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Right, this is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, is diversity and inclusion destroying our armed forces? There's a poll up on Twitter right now asking you that very question. Cast your vote now.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
So a new poll has revealed that Gen Z or Gen Z, I don't know how I'm supposed to say it, and British boys and men are more likely to believe that feminism has done more harm than good when compared with older respondents. So the polling also found that a quarter of UK males aged 16 to 29 believe it's harder to be a man than a woman, with 1 in 5 looking favourably upon controversial influencer Andrew Tate. 37% of them also agree that the phrase toxic masculinity is unhelpful. So, with Gen Z boys increasingly holding this view, has feminism done more harm than good? Let me know your thoughts. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, tweet me @gbnews, and make sure you take part in our poll. But I'll bring you those results shortly. Going head-to-head on this tonight, our author and commentator Anna May Mangan and YouTuber and social media influencer Pearl Davies. Both of you, thank you very much. Pearl, I'll start with you. Has feminism done more harm than good, especially when it comes to these Gen Z boys?
Yes, it has. Feminism really has turned into a bunch of crybaby women that want to complain that we're not given equal opportunity when really women are given more opportunity than men. And so, yeah, I would say feminism is a hate group and it's a bunch of crybaby women.
Anna, would you like to come back to that? Crybaby women feminism, apparently.
So we've got a right lad with us tonight with Pearl and her opinions, haven't we?
how could it possibly do harm? Pearl wouldn't do, I hope you vote, I assume you do. I hope you're not chained to the kitchen sink at home. I'm not sure if you've got a job, so I don't know very much about you, but if there's a bloke doing the same thing as you, you're probably earning less than him. So of course feminism is something that it got us the vote in the first place, and it's still doing a power of good. It's just whingy men, and actually I changed that, they're lads, they're not men.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
It's 37 after 4 o'clock. If you've just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, earlier I did a monologue about the Labour Party potentially running this country and all the strikes and the unions that are supporting it. Let's have a look at what you've been saying. Let's see. Oh, Julie says, please, Nana says, please, never Labour. Labour is bad enough without Starmer. Never Labour. Never! And John says it's the Speaker who should apologise for not reprimanding Starmer for breaking the MP's code of conduct. So keep your messages coming. gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at GB News. It's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, is diversity and inclusion destroying our armed forces, as a leaked document has revealed that the British Army wants to relax security checks for potential recruits from overseas in order to boost diversity and inclusion? Now, Britain's armed forces have consistently failed to hit recruitment targets over the past decade, and they're seeking to plug those gaps by increasing ethnic minority representation, which currently stands at 14%. While Defence Secretary John Shapps is said to be furious about the findings, he ordered a root and branch review. But what do you think? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, is diversity and inclusion destroying our armed forces? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly and author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. OK, Danny Kelly.
I don't think it's destroying anything. I think potentially it could destroy something, or it could certainly impact things negatively. I don't think there should be any sort of quota system when it comes to a life or death role protecting this state. I think that the best men, and I'm going to use the word men, yes, overwhelmingly it's men, so just if you just put it with me lazily using that word.
Man embraces woman.
Rather than having to constantly caveat with and woman. It's
well,
just
when you say men, you could say as in man, as in human.
Fine, OK, the human.
Well, you could say people.
Oh, well, I could do, but, you know, overwhelmingly frontline soldiers are blokes.
Am I turning woke?
You are, young lady.
Do you know what? Do you know, because I saw this amazing video of the Israeli armed forces, and they were women, and one of them was in these fabulous, this is what I would have, the stiletto, well, they're not stiletto, but they were high boots. And then she had it on the back, and then she had this, like, gun on the back, diagonal. Then she had, like, the bullets.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like the glamorisation. Have you signed up for
the Israeli army?
No, I'm going to sign up for the army. Nambo.
I don't like the glamorisation of war.
Oh, no, but I'm just saying that there are women in the armed forces.
Of course there are, but... Okay. All right, let me rewind 30 seconds.
Listen, you might as well look good if you go to war. You don't have to look rubbish.
Let me rewind 30 seconds. It should be the best man for the job, OK? There shouldn't be any quota... Best person for the job, OK. There shouldn't be any quotas to fill. It's not like it's the BBC where 50% of all local radio breakfast show hosts have to be women.
Oh, here we go.
They have to.
Here it comes.
After spending...
It's all about him, isn't it?
But that's not going to save or cost a life, is it? That's my point. It's not going to save and it's not going to cost a life. It's the best man for the job. And that's what worries me about the army and these... Is it DIE or D... Well, we don't want it to be DIE. Currently, it's DEI. Be careful it doesn't turn into DIE.
In some places, they actually call it DIE. Christine Hamilton.
It's absolutely ludicrous. The army, by army, I mean the forces.
Yes.
The army, the defences, they are about the most fundamentally important place, as well as the police, where you need the right people for the job. And we've allowed, somebody on the panel earlier was saying that, you know, the policemen are now sort of 4 foot high. And army...
4 foot high. They're taller than that.
Well, OK, I'm
not dwarfs.
exaggerating. The army now allows their recruits to be far from fit. They're not fighting fit, they're overweight.
The army?
Yes, the figures for some of the army people are... What we need to do, if there's a shortage of people, we need to have a look at the millions, I think it's 6 million people now who are on universal credit. Now, I do not believe that all those 6 million can't get a job. Some of those could very easily be taken into the army, spruced up, tidied up, stiffened up, and then they would become a part of
Come on, darling.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Spruce up generally, get them fighting.
I just caught my image. There I am. There's no way a squaddy is as fat as me. I've never seen an overweight squaddy.
I didn't say they were as fat as you.
No, but you said overweight. I don't think you're overweight in the army.
Might be a chef, though. You could do a chef's role.
I used to be a chef.
They are not.
I used to be a chef, yes.
Did any food ever get out?
But you'll never see someone on the front line as overweight as I am.
No,
or indeed overweight. The drill sergeant wouldn't allow it.
I never said anybody is overweight as you, Daddy.
Or overweight.
Yes, the army, the fitness requirements for the army have gone down because they're desperate to get people in. And now they're saying they... Get people off the dole and into the army.
They may be fat when they go in, but they won't be fat on the front line.
They are relaxing.
The drill sergeant will get all that fat off them.
Not as it used to be.
Well, you know, yeah, I don't know. I think...
I'm not saying they're obese, obviously, but they're not as fit and, you know...
Well, I don't know.
There's lots of uses for you, Danny. Remember we talked about Danny Boys?
Danny what? Oh, in the water to prevent dinghies coming over from France.
Like 20, 30 of
Yeah, I'd be 20 or 30 metres into the water, stab the dinghies.
You're fat shaming.
Oh, I see. I thought I was stabbing them.
Get on the dinghy.
You're fat shaming.
I'm not fat.
No, it's not fat shaming.
We're having fun.
We're having fun.
You're turning woke anyway, Christine.
I think you two are woke. Nana, you're very woke.
I'm just trying to protect Danny
from
these barbs and
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Give her a
we
dig.
love Danny.
Well, I didn't say that. I just thought, you know, you were
lost another 6
you're
pounds.
The one that started talking about there'll be nobody as fat as or overweight as you.
I caught myself in the monitor, and then Christine said that the army is going to...
You caught yourself.
And the army is letting it...
I'm sorry. All right, I shouldn't have mentioned weight, Danny. I do apologise.
It's not even
a sensitive subject.
I think he started it.
But anyway, it's utterly absurd to have these DID, whatever it is, DIY quotas.
And we've got a Gurkha regiment.
Right.
Some of the bravest soldiers are from Nepal.
Of course
the
they are.
Gurkha regiment. How diverse do you want it to be? You've got a whole regiment.
Yeah.
Well, I just don't see the relevance of we need to go abroad and get... I think they need to start looking at the people here and thinking, why aren't people in this country wanting to join the army? And I think they need to start looking at what they're offering people. So it's not enough money. When you finish the army, they don't look after you. Why would anyone want to do that?
Yep.
And then, not only that, when you're in the army, a lot of the kit, they haven't really got... A lot of the time, they weren't spending the right money on the kit. So I think, they need to start thinking about what they're offering. It is a job, and they need to make sure they treat people properly, and I suspect they'll get lots more people.
Well,
double the wage.
There are too many youngsters now going to second-rate universities doing totally useless degrees. It does nothing for them in the future. If they could actually, instead of just going to university and having 3 years having fun, they went into the army, they'd probably come out significantly better people.
And thinner.
And thinner. Well, maybe not.
More importantly, thinner.
Well, come on.
But it's a nonsense. Anyway, thank goodness Grant Shapps is saying...
furious.
Yes, good. We've got Shapps, not ships.
I wonder what would happen if it was the Labour Party in charge of this stage. Do you know what I mean? I'd be a bit concerned about that. But let's see...
Who is Shadow Defence?
I don't know, but it could be anyone.
Diane Abbott.
Probably.
She's not in the Labour Party anymore, I don't think.
I don't think she is.
I want to see what you've been saying, because a lot of you have been getting in touch. Claire says, how could the MOD be so stupid and incompetent? Recruitment must be carried out in-house and to the same security standards that they previously used. Gary says diversity and inclusion is destroying everything it touches. The armed forces are just one aspect of it, a totally unnecessary addition to society. Debbie says the armed forces should recruit whoever passes the process. It should have nothing to do with race. I agree with you completely. And they should also be trying to recruit people in this country, because they don't appear to want to do that. They're looking abroad for that. Well, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Coming up, we'll continue with our Great British debates and discuss lots of things. We're talking about the police and their borders and whether you would volunteer to police them. But next, it's Worldview. Paul Duddridge, host of the Politics People podcast, gives us the latest on what's going on stateside.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, this is GB News. We are the People's Channel. I'm Nana Akua. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio, and it's time for World View as we travel. Let's travel to America and get the latest from the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Duddridge, and find out what's happening in the world of Donald Trump. Hello, Paul. Right, so let's talk Trump. There's an anti-Trump New York Times headline. The question is not if Biden should step down, it's how. Is that an anti-Trump?
Yeah, now, no, the New York Times is anti-Trump. So for the New York Times, that is the Bible of that's the broadsheet Bible of the wokerati. For them to come out and put out a headline saying it's not if Biden should step aside, it's how. That's the huge shift. And I've not been the only one that spotted this, and it's not only the New York Times. Every left-leaning anti-Trump newspaper has started. Basically, it's over. You've now seen the end of the Biden so-called presidency, and so even Hillary Clinton today, Hillary Clinton, who is the queen of the Democrat Party, has said age is a consideration when we're dealing with Joe Biden. So that's it. I mean, basically, they have all turned on him, and so it's now a matter of replacing him. The question is, who is going to replace him and when? We've got the Democrat convention in August. I've been optimistic for Biden, saying, look, he'll make it to August. But I tell you, the way they've turned on him this week, this could be in a matter of weeks that he's actually replaced as the nominee.
Well, I just don't even understand why they thought that they were fooling us into believing that he is actually capable of making any decisions at all. It's just absurd. And now they finally accepted that what we're seeing, and they're reinforcing and telling us now what you're seeing is absolutely correct. But it's taken them so long. I just don't understand why it's taken them so long. So how's it looking for Trump now, then? Because, of course, there's the Supreme Court and there's an argument that's looking positive for him. And he may be kept on the ballot in Colorado. Well, they have to. Who else have they got? There's nobody else other than Trump.
Exactly. Look, we've always talked about this. Things that we've said on this show, OK? Biden's going to go before the election and that Trump will stay on the ballot in Colorado and he will be the nominee. But it's finally hit the Supreme Court. We're always there with any sane person is like, OK, this will get appealed to the Supreme Court. That started on Thursday. We'll get the result in 90 days. The arguments look really positive. They're at least sticking to the Constitution, which is their job in the Supreme Court. I hate to be a little bit negative on this. I don't want Biden to be replaced. I would love Trump to actually go up against Biden in the debates. If that debate alone would be the most watched show in television history. Anybody vaguely competent with the machinery of the US Democrat establishment behind them can be a true contender to Trump. I mean, the vacuum, the leadership vacuum in that White House and in the coming presidential campaign is really what we've benefited from. It's part of the reason that Trump is so buoyant and is leading so well. But you replace Biden with a Gavin Newsom, who looks like the likely candidate. Everybody apparently on the left wants Michelle Obama. I take that with a pinch of salt. I don't think that she's likely to be the candidate, but there's a lot of wish fulfillment going on. But Gavin Newsom is in Vegas this weekend courting billionaires. So it looks like, and he's gone and met the president of China, etc. And this is just the governor of California. So I think he is the likely replacement of Biden. I think he's a much more formidable debater than Joe Biden. And I think Trump would have real competition then, bearing in mind it's so finely balanced in those 6 battleground states that we're going to see.
Wow, I don't know why it took them so long. That's very foolish of them. There's a lot I want to talk to you about, but I wanted to quickly get you to Tucker Carlson and his interview with Putin. How was that received in America?
Well, the minute that the news channel said don't watch it, everybody went, "Oh, we definitely should be watching that." Then it was a little bit like during COVID when the news channel said, like, "We are the only people to give you information. It's actually illegal to look at other information." So no, I think it was received well on both sides of the aisle. I don't think you'd have to be a real policy wonk to have any kind of criticism of it. And to be fair, Tucker Carlson did actually put legitimate questions to Putin that nobody else had bothered to ask, or people assumed he wouldn't be brave enough to ask. And so, we actually got a why did you go into Ukraine actually answered from the horse's mouth. So I think largely it's been received very, very well. And it's the kind of interview that we used to see 30 years ago. If you think about it, we used to have proper sit-down interviews. I think Trevor McDonald went and met with Saddam Hussein, and it was not a million miles away from the formality of this kind of interview. Now, apparently, you can only talk to leaders who you agree with. It's crazy. So it was very well received, I would say.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? Well, listen, Paul, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. That's Paul Dudridge, host of the Politics People podcast. Good to talk to you. We'll talk to him again next week and get an update from him. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Still to come, my Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, would you volunteer to police our borders? I've got a poll up on X right now asking you that question. Would you volunteer to police our borders? But first, let's get some weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. This morning's cloud, mist and fog is slowly clearing its way off to provide more in the way of sunnier spells for the rest of the afternoon and even into the next few days. Still got some quite persistent rain across the Northern Isles, a very wet end to Sunday for Shetland, and also some quite frequent showers for parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland turning wintry over higher ground areas throughout tonight. But elsewhere there are some clear spells in between those showers. Underneath those clear skies though, temperatures will take a little bit of a tumble down into low single figures for many of us. A patchy frost in rural spots, maybe some icy stretches around first thing in the morning. But generally Monday is a day of sunshine and showers. Those showers will be most frequent over towards the north and west with some quite blustery winds around at times. Those towards the east and the south, though, more likely to stay drier and actually a fairly pleasant, fine day with a decent number of sunny intervals in there. Temperatures generally ranging between 6 and 10 degrees Celsius, which is around where we'd expect them to be for this point in the year. On Tuesday, we still have this area of low pressure in the far north, bringing again a breezy, blustery picture with some showers. But this ridge of high pressure elsewhere will allow for a slightly finer, drier start with some sunny spells once again. But really, all eyes will be turning to this area in the southwest as we see cloud thicken and outbreaks of rain eventually arrive throughout the day. And that will increasingly spread further to other areas of the UK as we head throughout the middle point of the week. But also some milder air trapped into that. So temperatures are generally going to be on an upwards climb. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right.
Growth.
And then people, you know, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, you know, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon. It is 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. Coming up, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, would you volunteer to police our borders? But next, my outside guest this week is a barrister, a former champion boxer, and he's also written a new book that some are calling the British Jack Reacher, and some say he saved Anthony Joshua's career. Do you know who he is yet? gbviews@gbnews.com, but first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you very much. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. Leading the news at 5 o'clock, the government has tonight warned Israel against its planned full-scale offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah, with ministers saying it could be catastrophic for civilians. Those warnings come ahead of an expected call tonight between US President Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss his plans in Rafah. Joe Biden has previously described them as over the top. However, the Israeli Prime Minister has told reporters enough of the 132 remaining hostages are still alive to warrant a ground offensive. Earlier, tanks, troops and bulldozers were seen operating along the Gaza-Israel border. Benjamin Netanyahu says he does, though, have a plan to evacuate civilians from the crowded area beforehand. It follows at least 44 people yesterday, including several children who died in what the Palestinians have claimed were Israeli airstrikes. Well, the family of murdered teenager Brianna Ghey have today been holding a vigil to mark the first anniversary of her death. Earlier, I spoke to our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper, who's been at that gathering.
Well, 1 year on from the tragic death of Brianna Ghey, hundreds of people have gathered here in Warrington for a vigil in her memory. We heard from several of Brianna's friends who spoke, bringing tears to the eyes of the crowd as they remembered their friend. We also heard from the head teacher at Brianna's school. We finally heard from Brianna's mother, Esther, who spoke emotionally and emotively about the loss of her daughter. Here's what she had to say.
Brianna was an amazing, unique and joyful teenager. I will be forever thankful that I was lucky enough to spend 16 years with her. She taught me so much and gave me so much happiness and love. If there's one piece of advice that I can give to any parent, it would be to hug your children tight and never stop telling them that you love them.
Esther Ghey there, the mother of Brianna Ghey, speaking earlier. Well, two people have today been arrested after an 8-year-old child was seriously injured in a suspected XL bully attack. The dog had bitten the child's head in Merseyside yesterday afternoon. The boy has had emergency surgery and we understand remains in a serious but stable condition. Doctors say his injuries are, though, life-changing. Officers seized the dog, which they believe to be an XL bully, and a 49-year-old woman and a 30-year-old man have been arrested, though they are not related to that child. 124 migrants crossed the English Channel on Saturday on 3 small boats. That's according to new figures from the Home Office. The latest arrivals bring the total for the year so far to just over 1,500. That's down from the 2,072 at this time last year, but up from the figure in 2022. Apart from the latest crossings, small boats had not been intercepted in the Channel since January the 31st. You'll remember the Prime Minister has made stopping the boats a key pledge of his leadership as the country approaches the next general election. The Housing Secretary is warning young people shut out of the UK's housing market could turn to authoritarianism. Michael Gove has said today that a failure by the government to tackle the housing crisis could harm democracy, as well as the Conservatives' chances at the general election. In an interview with The Times, he said the traditional route for young people to work hard and get on the housing ladder has now gone. Gove criticised Labour for, he says, the continuous rejection of housing policies.
The difference between a party saying that its policy is pro-builder, not blocker, and then when we bring things forward, every single Conservative MP, every single Conservative I know backed our proposals for new homes, and Labour were whipped to a man and woman against it. So this is not about individuals, this is about a party that makes big claims, and yet, as we see time after time, it turns turtle. And that's why Keir Starmer is the jellyfish of British politics. He's transparent, spineless, swept along by the tide.
This afternoon, the departure of the Royal Navy aircraft carrier, HMS Prince of Wales, was cancelled at the last minute. It was about to set sail to replace its sister ship, which was also forced to cancel its deployment due to an issue with its propeller. The £3 billion vessel was to take over leading the largest NATO exercise since the Cold War. However, despite people lining the walls of Portsmouth Harbour to watch the 65,000-tonne warship set sail, it failed to leave the jetty. And the King has attended church in Sandringham for the first time this morning since his cancer diagnosis. His Majesty was seen walking alongside Queen Camilla and saying hello to well-wishers in the distance. Last night, King Charles thanked the nation for their overwhelming support in his first public message since his diagnosis. The monarch said such kind thoughts are of great comfort and encouragement to him. Buckingham Palace has said that he is facing a form of cancer, though it's unrelated to his recent prostate treatment. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today is broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly and author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Still to come, each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting career, to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And today, my guest is a barrister and a former champion boxer. He's also just written a new book that some are calling the British Jack Reacher. Some say he saved Anthony Joshua's career, and he's dealt with both MI6 and the FBI in his legal career. Any guesses? GBviews at gbnews.com. Then for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, would you volunteer to police our borders? Former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick believes the French should deploy Texas-style blockades. But should we here in Britain raise a citizens' army to help stop the boats? Would you sign up? And as ever, get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. But before we find out who my mystery guest is, you're not going to want to miss this. The Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is going to be appearing exclusively on GB News on our People's Forum, which is an hour-long question and answer session on issues that matter to you. Let's have a listen to what he has to say.
Hi, Rishi here. As Prime Minister, I'm focused on delivering on your priorities. So I'll be on the road to join GB News for a special People's Forum on Monday the 12th of February, where I'll be taking questions from a live audience about the issues that really matter to you: the economy, immigration, the NHS. See you there.
That's tomorrow at 8 p.m. The Prime Minister will take part in the special People's Forum live on GB News. It'll be in the northeast of England. Of course, you can find out more on the website. And over the course of the hour, he will take questions directly from you. And, you are the great British public, so it'll be very interesting reading what he has to say. But if you've just tuned in, it's fast approaching 9 minutes after 5 o'clock. And each Sunday at 5 or just after, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting career, to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. Now, my guest this afternoon is a criminal barrister. He's a writer, he's a former champion boxer, and in 20-plus years as at the criminal bar, he's prosecuted and defended some of the country's highest-profile criminals. He draws on his own legal experience to bring a striking authenticity and accuracy to his best-selling thrillers. Who do you think he is? Well, of course, there's criminal barrister and writer Tony Kent. Tony, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What's it like, a criminal barrister? I used to love Crown Court, and I would have gone into the legal profession. I did actually want to be a barrister or something like that, but I decided there was too much reading.
There's a lot of reading.
There's an awful lot of reading.
That's why I became a writer,
so
just to double up the reading.
So what was it like for you? How did you become a criminal barrister? What's your background?
My background is, I thought when I was becoming a barrister, it was unusual for a barrister. I subsequently found out it wasn't really. But I come from a family of builders. I'm one of 5 kids. I'm the middle one of 5. And we grew up on a council estate not too far from here, just up the A40 in Northolt. And the whole idea, or the whole sort of not ambition, but the plan for us, or the expectation for us, was that we would go and become builders. And that's what quite a few of my relatives have done. So I spent my life not really thinking I could be a barrister. I thought barristers don't come from that world. So I loved things like Crown Court. For me, it was Cabinet QC. I used to watch Cabinet QC with my mum. And as my career went on, when there's certain things that would come up that would remind us of the show, so we'd go to Middle Temple, or when I got my bag, my blue and then my red bag.
What does that mean?
When you qualify, you can buy a blue bag and you can put your robes and your wig in there. It's and it's like an old Santa.
Oh, I love wigs.
But then when you get to a certain point, you then get, if you do well enough, you're allowed to have one purchased for you by a QC. So you'll get, or a Casey, as they are now.
I was going to say.
And after about 10 years, I had a very big case with a Casey who then became a judge, and he bought me my red bag. So a red bag is almost a status symbol. It means I'm not just qualified, I know what I'm doing, and that's been recognised by someone at the top of the game. And all those things we saw on Cabinet QC growing up, and so when these would happen to me in real life, they were sort of big moments.
Wow.
But yeah, so no, I was never going to become a barrister. It was never what could happen to a kid from a family of builders. And then it happened. Things just kind of kept going the right way. And ultimately, that's what I became. And I was very lucky because I was taken on at the #1 criminal chambers in the country. And I was kind of taken on there by pure fluke. Because again, without ranting on about the sort of council estate business, I thought, I don't come from this background. I didn't go to Oxbridge. I went to Dundee University, and I was looking for places to apply, but I thought they're never going to want someone like me in the top places. So I looked up all the top places, and there were 3 Hare Court was Man United, and then there were others. There were 2 Hare Court, there were 3 Raymond, there were 18. They're all based on their addresses, and so I didn't apply to any of them because I thought none of them are going to be interested in this kid from Northolt, from the racecourse estate, and I applied to a place called 2 Bedford Row. Never heard of them. We'll go there. I'm sure that they might be interested. I applied to 2 Bedford Row, go along, have an interview, goes really well. I was very relaxed. It was lovely. Go back for the next interview, goes very well, very relaxed, all lovely. Go back for the final interview, which includes a few advocacy exercises. They invited me to go there and train. And then at this point, I thought, maybe I should look them up and find out who they are. And it turns out they were 3 Hare Court. They were Man United, but they'd moved. So they'd changed the name because it's all based on addresses. They were no longer 3 Hare Court, they were 2 Bedford Row. And I thought I was applying to Accrington Stanley. And in fact, I was applying to Man United. And I got taken on there.
As a barrister?
As a pupil, to be a pupil barrister to be trained.
OK.
And then I got through that, and then they offered to take me on as a tenant, which is a member of Chambers. And I stayed there for, I think, the best part of 12 years.
Wow. Did you have to... obviously, you would have had to do exams and things. And did you have to get a degree?
They're going to change that now. There's talk about changing that. But yes, back then, you had to get a degree. I got a law degree. Again, because we weren't university people, I thought to be a lawyer, you had to do a law degree. And I now discover, no, you don't. And there are many more interesting things you could do. And then you could do a conversion at the end. But I didn't know that. So I did a law degree. I then did my bar school, which is the most pointless year of my life. And then did pupillage, which is your apprenticeship stage. And that's where you really learn. You learn in your pupillage. The bar school, you basically learn a load of things that they then make you unlearn when you start pupillage.
And so what about the boxing? Where does the boxing come in?
Boxing is just something that I always did. The family of builders is also a family of boxers. There's lots of boxers in the family. The moment we could walk around, the moment you could walk and toddle...
Give you some gloves and punching each other in the face.
Precisely. Well, I had 2 older brothers. One brother was 5 years older, one brother was 4 years older, and they didn't hold back. So if I was going to avoid being tortured, I had to learn to fight. And, yeah, and of the 3 of us, we all did some boxing. I was the one that took it seriously. I tend to take hobbies quite seriously. Once I started, I think I was about 11 when I first started boxing. And my first fight was, I think I was 12 or 13, and my last fight, well, I think I was 22. And throughout those years, I competed in various things. I trained, I won some amateur championships, national and international things, and I trained some university boxers. I was the head of Scottish university boxing for a while. I trained the Scottish university team. So it was a bit of an obsession. I loved boxing, but it was never It was never going to be my future.
Well, as long as they didn't give you a hit to the head, which knocked some sense out of you, because you're obviously very clever, because you've also written some books. Talk to me about your latest book.
My latest book's the one in the middle, The Shadow Network, which is my 5th book. This is my 3rd, 4th and 5th. The other 2 are under the table. We thought they wouldn't all fit on the, in the lens. The Shadow Network is, yes, my 5th book. It's been very well reviewed. It's got some incredible little blurbs in the last few days. One of the, I'm not sure I'm allowed to mention newspapers, but the Daily Mail...
you can mention that, that's fine.
The Daily Mail referred to me as having become Britain's David Baldacci, who is my single favourite all-time writer, so it couldn't be a bigger bit of praise. And then just today, the Sunday Times picked it as one of their thrillers of the month and said it was the British Jack Reacher. So, high praise. For me, it's James Bond for the 21st century.
So give us a sort of summary of what it is.
It stars my two main characters. Joe Dempsey is an international espionage intelligence agent. And my other character is Michael Devlin, an Irish criminal barrister with a dark past.
Devlin, good name.
Both of them are named after sort of ancestors of my mum. And yeah, they get involved in... There's a shooting in the Grotmark in The Hague. One of the people who gets shot is a friend of Michael's. Michael being a barrister, this guy's a lawyer, he's over there for a war crimes tribunal. Michael and Dempsey go over there to find this chap, to find where he is he dead, is he alive? And they find themselves thrown headlong into a massive overarching conspiracy that goes back 100 years, involving covert Russian agents.
Oh, I love that. There we go, The Spies. Those are my favourite books.
It is very spy, very spy-y.
I love Firefox down. I used to read all the Firefox... What's his name? Craig... Was it Daniel Craig? Not Daniel Craig, I'm thinking of Daniel. Craig something his name was. Craig Stevens, I think it was. I don't know, he used to write some very good books.
Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously, I haven't written a book, or I hadn't written a book ever, but I haven't read a book in years, like fully read a book.
Really?
Yeah, I read a bit of Spare, but then I got bored in the middle. It was just too... I find that I don't have...
Is that the Prince Harry book?
Yeah, it was awful. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, I couldn't bring myself to pick that up.
Too much whinging. I didn't buy it. Somebody sent me a copy so I could just look at it, but I wasn't prepared to pay for it. But it's just too much rambling and whinging. And I tend to read about half of the book and then I tend to get bored, but spy books and anything that's got conspiracies in it, you might be able to grab.
Well, there's conspiracies coming out your ears in this one. There's this way, that way. So hopefully it will keep you.
And is there a sort of twist at the end?
Oh, there's always a twist at the end. You've got to have... I'm a big believer when you're writing these books, you've got to start with a bang, you've got to end with a twist.
And so it's not out yet, is it?
It comes out on Thursday.
Yeah.
It comes out on Thursday. We had a launch event this week, got another launch event next week, because any excuse for a party. But yeah, it's out on Thursday. It can be pre-ordered. Yeah. But it will be on the shelves on Thursday.
Wow, 15th February 2024. Pre-order, you can get yours. The Shadow Network. Wow. Sounds good. How long did it take you to write it, Tony?
This one took a bit longer because post-COVID, post-everything, the way the criminal justice system is, everything's gone a bit mad. Everything's got very, very busy. There's not that many barristers left. We lost about half of them. Yeah. So everyone's scrambling around.
How long?
How long? 2 years.
Listen to that, barristers.
Normally 1 year. It's normally 1 year beginning to end. This one took 2.
2 years. Listen, Tony, I wish you all the best with that. Sounds great.
Thank you very much.
That is criminal barrister and writer Tony Brent. Oh, great book. Listen, if you've just tuned in, welcome on board. This is GB News. It's fast approaching 19 minutes after 5 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. Coming up, Supplement Sunday, where my panellists pick out some news stories that caught their eye. But next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, would you volunteer to police our borders?
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake, civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each other.
Why do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, 22 minutes after 5 o'clock. We are the People's Channel. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. You can also stream the show live on YouTube. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome. Now, just to read some of the emails, because you've been getting in touch with your thoughts, gbviews@gbnews.com. We were talking about whether you would police your borders. David says, I would like to invent a border force that actually protected our borders. Graham says, I believe so many of us could do a better job than the job the Border Force Police are currently doing. I would volunteer. Joe says, we seem to have practically open borders at the moment, and I'm fed up of it, so I would indeed volunteer to police our borders. You see, they say they can't recruit anybody. Well, that's three of you right here. Mark says, I think policing our borders is far more complex than we make it out to be, but I would not volunteer to police our borders. Yeah, 3 out of 4 ain't bad. Well, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, would you volunteer to police our borders? Former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick believes the French should deploy Texas-style blockades into the shallow waters off the coast of northern France to help prevent smugglers getting off boats into the sea. But could this be enough to help stop the boats? Now, many have crossed this year, lots, as we know, and we could go further in this country and deploy potentially volunteers to police them. What do you think? Is that actually possible? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I thought I'd ask you whether you would be up for volunteering to do just that. Well, joining me to discuss, former Border Force Chief Kevin Saunders, the leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton, and also former advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. All right, well, I'm going to start with you, Kevin. Is that even a possibility that you could have, as we have volunteer police forces, volunteer army recruits, we have a territorial army, they're volunteers. Could we not have something for Border Force?
No, you couldn't. Border Force job, working on the passenger arrival control, is a very specialist and very difficult job to do. You have to be able to talk to people. You have to be able to deal with people that are unhappy. You ideally would be able to have another language in your pocket. There's all sorts of things that you'd have to be able to do to make a good Border Force IO.
But I've ticked all three. I've ticked all three. So, you know what I mean? I can speak another language, I can deal with people, I can talk to people. I'm thinking, why are they not considering something where they train? Can you not train some of the people who they're saying are idle, sitting at home, doing nothing that they want to? Can we not have some sort of volunteer border force idea? Is that not... I'll come to Charlie Rowley. I'll come back to you, Kevin. Charlie?
Yes, you absolutely could. And I don't see why not, because, as you said earlier on, Nana, you have volunteer police, you have the Army Reserve. You don't actually necessarily need to be the one dealing with an issue, but if you are a volunteer and you spot something, you can alert the correct authorities anyway to come to your aid and assistance. It's the public in general policing themselves. You know, members of the public spot crime all the time. They call the police and the police come down and deal with that nitty-gritty side, the actual enforcement side, like you need to see from a proper border enforced officer. But you can certainly have a voluntary arm to that. And I was just in the gym downstairs at this very studio now, sort of making sure that if I were called up, I mean, it would be very desperate times, but, you know, I would do all that I could to protect our borders if that was needed.
Yeah, I mean, I would sign up to a volunteer border force and give one day a week or something to go and train and practice, and I quite enjoy it. Neil Hamilton.
Yeah, well, like you, Nana, I tick 3 boxes too, and I'd be very happy to be in the border force, or indeed on the Channel Coast with my pitchfork as a kind of dad's army of manning our borders.
No pitchforks, no pitchforks, Neil.
But I think that, you know, this is something we should consider more widely. I mean, Switzerland has a citizen army, for example. We know how under-resourced our armed forces are generally, just like the border force. So what we want to do is create a much greater sense of civic duty amongst our population by giving them a chance to do, in a voluntary or kind of reserve capacity, many of the jobs which we can't get full-time equivalents for.
See, Kevin? So, Kevin, we've all said we can do the 3 things that you said. It's quite complex, we know. We could do something that's maybe supporting those on the front line in some way. But why is it such an impossible task, or not something that could be considered?
Let me try and explain.
OK.
We've used police officers, retired police officers and current MOD police officers to fill gaps at high days and holidays on the border control. But while they're terribly good people, and they're certainly the police officers are very good at talking to people, they just do not have the in-depth knowledge to deal with anybody other than British citizens. I mean, how would you land an Argentinian, for example? What would you do with a German national with no ID card? You know, these are things that you come across all the time. And you can't sit at a desk and put your hand up and call an immigration officer over and say, look, I've got this problem, because all you would be doing is having immigration officers basically doing the job full time. And how would you pick a forgery? What would you look at, for example, in an Italian residency card to see whether it was forged or not?
Well, Neil's shaking his head there. I think we can all learn those things. But Neil, what do you think? I don't see why I couldn't learn that. Neil?
Yeah, well, that's absolutely right. Of course, people can be trained up to do these jobs. It's not exactly rocket science, is it? Yes, there's no doubt a huge variety of different situations that occur, and you can't necessarily train somebody up for them all right at the start, but you've got to start somewhere. When you recruit people into the border force right at the very beginning, if they're working there full-time, they have to learn the job similarly. So I don't see why this can't be done on a part-time basis as well. It seems to me a counsel of despair to say that, you know, because there's difficulties, all too difficult, it would never do anything if we took that view.
Charlie Rowley.
Yeah, so I think we just need to separate the 2 or 3 issues out, because Border Force are responsible for so many different things. I think the thing that Kevin was talking about in particular is if you're sitting on a desk, if you're letting people into the country, if you're making that decision where people turn up perhaps legally, that is one aspect of it. But you could be a volunteer casual observer on the southeast of South Coast, for example, or the southeast of Kent, for example, just taking part in overnight patrols just as an observer. If you then see illegal crossings, for example, you can then alert the much-needed authorities authorities to then go and intercept the boats or intercept the individuals that might be needed as a volunteer. So I think there are many, many roles that the Border Force obviously do carry out. The much more higher skilled, much more ones that need tougher decisions are going to be people that will be trained and will be qualified. But the lesser roles, where it might just be an observation capacity or one where you could just be a volunteer, I think that's right to involve the public where there is a shortfall in the numbers of people.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I'm a lawyer by profession, and I'd be very happy to put my legal skills at the disposal of the Border Force. I'm perfectly capable of dealing with asylum seekers or others trying to enter the country and interrogate them, cross-examine them on their motives and their qualifications. And there must be lots of people like me who are retired or they've wound down in their profession who are prepared to do that.
Well, very quickly to Kevin, very quickly, your 20 seconds. What are your thoughts on that? We're all willing to learn and do whatever we're capable of doing within it. Why aren't the government potentially offering that?
Well, if you're that keen, then I would invite you to actually attempt to join Border Force full-time and become very valued members of the team. You can't do it on one day a week. I'm very sorry. Come and join us.
Well, how about volunteers, though? I think you could have a volunteer force. Well, so what do you think, then? Yes or no, then? Would you be prepared to volunteer? Charlie Rowley?
Yes, sign me up. Go on, sign me up. I'll see you tomorrow, Kevin.
Neil Hamilton, would you be prepared to volunteer?
I certainly would, rather.
Yeah, and finally to you, then. What about you, Kevin? Would you?
Would I go back?
Would you, yeah, volunteer?
Would I go back? I doubt very much if they would have me back, to be honest.
Well, they might take...
Because...
They'll take you as a volunteer, Kevin, I'm sure they would. Kevin, thank you very much.
I very much doubt it.
Former Border Force Chief Neil Hamilton, UKIP leader, and also Charlie Rowley. Thank you very much for your thoughts. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, would you volunteer to police our borders? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you very much and good evening from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 5:30. We start with the latest developments in the Israel-Hamas conflict. The UK government tonight is warning Israel against its planned full-scale offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah, with ministers here saying it could be catastrophic for civilians. Those warnings come ahead of an expected call tonight between US President Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss those plans in Rafah. Joe Biden, though, has previously described it as over the top. However, the Israeli Prime Minister has told reporters today that enough of the 132 remaining hostages are still alive to warrant the ground offensive. Earlier, tanks, troops and bulldozers could be seen operating along the Gaza-Israel border. Benjamin Netanyahu, though, says that he does have a plan to evacuate civilians from the crowded area beforehand. Yesterday, at least 44 people, including several children, died in what the Palestinians claim were Israeli airstrikes. Back here in the UK, a vigil has been held this afternoon in Warrington, marking 1 year since the murder of 16-year-old transgender teenager Brianna Ghey. Brianna's mother, Esther Ghey, spoke at the gathering, remembering her daughter as amazing, unique and joyful. She also urged other parents to cherish their children. This afternoon, the community was gathered, many dressed in pink, to pay their respects and celebrate Brianna's life. There's been another setback for aircraft carrier HMS Prince of Wales after its departure was cancelled at the last minute. A propeller issue stopped it from being sent to oversee a NATO drill, the largest of its kind since the Cold War. The £3 billion vessel was meant to take over from its sister ship, which was also forced to cancel its deployment for a similar issue with its propeller. Despite hundreds of people arriving in Portsmouth to watch the warship, HMS Prince of Wales failed to leave the harbour. And the King has attended a service at a church in Sandringham this morning for the first time since his cancer diagnosis. His Majesty walked alongside Queen Camilla and waved hello to well-wishers. Last night, King Charles thanked the nation for their overwhelming support in his first public message since the diagnosis announcement. The monarch said, "Such kind thoughts are of great comfort and encouragement to him." Buckingham Palace have said he is facing a form of cancer, though it's unrelated to his recent prostate treatment. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
What you've got to do is, it's a collective. You've got to look like a meteorologist. Nobody out there is necessarily going to be a meteorologist, but what I do on a daily basis is I look globally. I look at what we've got in terms of the track of weather that we've had in the UK. So if you go back a couple of years and we go back to the heat wave of July, August 2022, 40.3 degrees, there's a dot in the landscape, and before then there was other incidents going on. Now that was a huge dot because that was extreme temperatures, and then we, since then, last summer, although we didn't get that kind of record, we saw months with records, various months, May and June and September and October, all-time records. So another dot, and then you're looking again globally. What's going on globally? What's going on in China, in USA, in Africa, now in Australia, for example, records falling like ninepins. So when these storms come along, you've got to say, OK, would they have happened anyway? The answer is probably yes, they probably would have done. But when you start getting where we're up to with Jocelyn is number 10, then that's not the record. The record is 11. Named storms, 2015-16. So we've been there before, but only a few years ago. So these things are starting to mount up. And do you know what? On the can of climate change, climatologists, better people than me, people who study this expertly, and they look at it and they say, OK, what we're going to get with extra dimension of heat in the atmosphere, which energy and heat that basically means that you've got more intense storms potentially that can carry more water. What do you get? You get higher wind velocities and you get more water and or snow. We've just gone through a period where parts of this country have been deluged and flooded for the first time.
Yes. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Oh, stop it. Be quiet, the two of you. Sorry if you just tuned in. It's just coming up to 38 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time for our Great British debate this hour. And I'm asking, would you volunteer for to police our borders? Somebody has written, "Wold you." So former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick believes the French should deploy Texas-style blockades in the shallow waters of the coast of northern France to help prevent smugglers setting off boats into the sea. But could this be enough to help stop the boats? That's a plan, isn't it? According to the latest figures, 1,506 migrants have crossed this year alone. So could we go further in this country and deploy volunteers to police those borders? So for the Great British debate this hour, I'm asking, would you volunteer to do just that? Would you volunteer to police our borders? Well, let's see what my panel make of that. Joining me, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, and also broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Right. Christine Hamilton, would you volunteer?
Well, I wouldn't be much use because I'm a bit of a physical crock, really. But yes, in principle, the spirit would be very, very willing to do that. But what I really want is for the French to say, yes, if you catch them on your beaches, you can turn them round and send them back to us. That's what we need to do. But yes, I would be very happy to go and man the beaches in Dover. Yes.
What about you, Danny?
With my AK-44.
No, go.
Or 47 even.
What's the
47? I have no idea. I don't know what an AK is.
My sea legs aren't the best, so
you
I would
be on the beach.
You'd be on the beach.
What doing though? Shooing them off?
I told you, you're on the beach on the other side. You
doing what? On the French side or the British side?
Don't go into detail. It's just the principle. Would you be prepared to man our borders?
The detail's important with Nana because she wants me to. What Nana wants me to do is I am going to be almost like a smuggled individual myself. So I am going to be based amongst those people who've paid thousands of pounds. And apparently what I do is I wait till I get on the dinghy, 20 yards out, and stab it.
No, you don't stab it. You get on it and it sinks.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see.
What's he on about? We need to multiply him by 20.
I love the idea of those boys, though, that stop the boats getting past them. That's a brilliant idea, isn't it? It's not going to harm
You're going to need a hell of a lot. How long is the French coast facing us? I mean, it's
hundreds of miles.
Hundreds of miles.
But in principle, it's a great idea.
Oh, in principle, it's a great idea.
But will that be enough, though, really? Seriously? They have to get over the thing.
Well, they wouldn't be able to get over it. These balls, big balls.
They'd have to be
your eyes,
Danny boys.
Danny boys.
Your eyes lit up. Massive, big balls. Just visualise that, Christine. Not for the first time. And then you've got these dinghies.
Oh, stop
and then your dinghies are trying to get over the over the big balls. It's impossible.
No, the dinghies wouldn't be able to get over the big balls. But the question is, would the balls be big enough? And would you be able to... But they'd have to be very closely tied together, that's the
tight
point.
balls.
Otherwise, stop it. You could they could cut a path. They could just...
Well, they need some sort of...
It's a good idea.
Well, be careful if they're going to cut it apart, because then they might go, and then slice the dinghy at the same time. So it's not going to be so easy to take that on board, is it?
Can I just say one quick thing? I said something incorrect earlier. Can I put it right? 2 seconds.
Of course you can.
2 seconds. Patrick, who's a viewer, who loves the show, loves you, etc., etc.
Doesn't love me.
You, I said, using both arms, all of you,
You're running
yes.
out of time,
I'm running out of exactly. I said that too many of the forces were overweight, and he corrected me. I should have said unfit. And apparently 3 out of 10 are unfit for service. Not fit enough for combat.
Just getting back to the policing of the borders. So if Christine and I, almost like a Dad's Army type scenario,
Mrs. Mannering,
we're on the beaches and we've got a load of dinghies landing. How do we police the illegals? What are we supposed to do?
What do you mean?
Well, we're policing the borders. The dinghies are about to land.
Well, we'll
push them back into the sea.
No, you don't push them back into the sea.
What are we supposed to do exactly?
With what? What are you on about? No, listen, it would be good. You can't turn the boats back, but would you be prepared to volunteer to help?
To do what, though?
Well, to do whatever it takes to help.
Give me an example about policing the borders once the dinghies
Did you not hear
are...
what Kevin said? You weren't listening, were you?
It's different. I was
watching
listening.
the football.
Watching the football.
Oh, you little grass.
Well, if you have been listening, Kevin Saunders was telling us that actually what they do at these processing centres. So you might help with some of the processing. You might be checking some of the papers. You might have some administrative roles, or you might be one of those who might go out on the boats if you spot the dinghies. So you might be a spotter of seeing them or whatever. So there's lots of jobs. He was basically giving us some roles that people may do. Obviously, some of them are more skilled than others. But he said that, he gave us 3 things that you need to be able to do. You need to be able to talk.
I can do that.
Talk. Deal with people.
I'm a great people person.
We can do that.
And finally, do you have another language?
Yes.
Yeah, I speak a bit of
Probably
Spanish.
not the right one, though. What language do most of them speak?
Only you lot.
Surely the key word is, would you volunteer? Would you give up your time freely to try and help repel the borders in some shape or form?
And I would absolutely give my time to do that. I think that'd be great. I'd be up for that. But right, the show's nothing without you and your views. Let's welcome our great British voices onto the show. Their opportunity to be on and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. I've got 3 of you. Right, let's start with... Who should we start with? Should we start with Julie from Bedfordshire? Let's see what she has to say. It'd be interesting whether she'd be up for volunteering. Where is Julie? Julie. Julie from Bedfordshire. Hair looks nice, Julie. What have you done there? That's very nice. I need to
I've got a fringe. I've got a fringe.
I think I might
now.
cut myself a fringe. Julie, so what do you think? Would you be prepared to volunteer to take some part or some role in helping to police our borders?
Absolutely. I'm standing next to Christine with an AK-47. I'm there. Absolutely.
No, she's an AK-44. I think there's her shoes. No guns, no weapons. No weapons, no guns. You're joking. You don't mean that. Julie doesn't mean that. No, but you mean...
I'm standing next to Christine. I am absolutely volunteering to police our borders. I can speak another language. I'm certainly a people person, and as you know, Nana, I can talk for England. I think I tick all the boxes. Where do I sign up?
Do you think the army are missing a trick? Next up, we've got Gareth Wynne-Jones in Snowdonia. Are we missing a trick here that we could have a sort of volunteer border force or some recruits who could help out? What do you think, Gareth?
I'm going to be a little bit contradicted here now. I'm going to say that maybe we need the border force to keep people in this country very, very soon, the way this country's going. That we're going to have borders to keep people here to work. And the way The morning I've had on GB News has been crazy, but let's think about what we had with the Home Guard. Let's think about the volunteers that came into, you know, the war rag, the women that fed this nation just after the war. These people, volunteers, can come in and do anything and everything. But as we are running now, I think people will be running out of this country, leaving a sinking ship, because as things are, this is getting very, very poor. And it's time we stuck together and started to drive forward in a positive way.
Yeah, here. Lastly, John Reid, he's there in Kidderminster. John, would you be prepared to... You know a lot about all of this stuff, so would you be prepared to police our borders, volunteer?
Well, yes, I would, Nana, but I think there's a few practical problems associated with it. Number one, I'm 75 years of age, so I can't actually chase many people nowadays. Number two, I live in Kidderminster in Worcestershire. It's a fair drive to Dover to stop the immigrants coming through. But in principle, I agree with Gareth. We need to do something because the country is going down the pan, isn't it? And we need a change of government or a change of something to improve it, make people want to stay, and do something serious about keeping those that are only coming here for monetary gain, to keep them out, unless they're of any use to us. If they're any use, I'm up for it, you know. But I'm not sure there's lots of doctors and nurses and care workers coming across on little dinghies.
No. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Yes, I'd be prepared to do it as well. I think we've got a clean sweep. Thank you very much to my great British voices, Julie Ford in Bedfordshire, Gareth Wynne-Jones in Snowdonia, and John Reid in Kidderminster. Thank you so much. Lovely to talk to you. Yeah, well, would you be prepared to do it? On the way, next, Supplement Sunday, where my panellists pick out some of the stories that caught their eye.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, where have you been? It's only the last 10 minutes of the show. I'm Nana Akua. It's now time for Supplement Sunday, where my panel and I discuss some of the news stories that caught their eye. Right, let's see. Joining me, Danny Kelly and also Christine Hamilton. Danny Kelly, we'll start with you. What have you got?
Well, Emma Thompson, who told us not to travel across the planet in aircraft, who famously gone on a 747 first class to fly from Los Angeles to London to tell us not to travel on aircraft. Well, we got another hypocrite. We got Queen guitarist Brian May, who tells us not to travel on aircraft, yet will travel on internal private aircraft in Japan. He's been accused of hypocrisy, and what he says is that it's OK, because when our team are booking private planes, we always contribute to a scheme to offset the carbon emissions. Why don't you just contribute to a scheme for carbon emission reduction, yet get on a charter plane? You can do both. They're not mutually exclusive. You can still offset, but you could still jump on a plane. First class, go first class. Travel in as much luxury as you want.
Although
but this guy's
is a scam, isn't it? Really, that's a scam. Anyway. It's not.
OK, but you can plant thousands of trees, but you can still take a 747.
They love people like that. Love telling us little people what to do and what not to do, and yet they don't follow their own advice.
That's right. So it stings of hypocrisy. He's defended himself.
Of course he would. Well, he's sort of got left, isn't he, to do that? Christine Hamilton.
Well, I mean, I couldn't believe this when I read it, but it is in the newspaper, so it is true. Train operators are now blaming... We've had leaves on the line, we've had this, we've had that, and now it's the wrong sort of sunlight. They can't handle the sunlight. It affects their driver's sight. Well, I kind of get that, actually, but it's the wrong kind of sunlight, apparently. They were disrupted... In the past 3 years, there have been 4,206 services disrupted. Goodness knows how many hours, and 15 days of delays. And this has caused massive payouts in compensation to operators for unplanned disruption. I mean, just when you thought it was safe to come out of the sea, as it were, you now get hit by the wrong sort of sunlight, delaying the trains. I mean, honestly.
That's ridiculous.
There you go.
What sort of sunlight was it, then?
It was just
bright.
Well,
it was just wrong. It was bright. I mean, in their defence, I mean, we all know what it's like to be driving, and you can't, especially if your windscreen's a bit dirty.
There's only one kind of sunlight.
Yeah, but there's only one type of sunlight, surely.
I know.
Maybe it's very low sun.
Let's be honest, it may be the newspaper that has put in this wrong kind of sunlight, going back to the wrong kind of leaves. They're just harping back, so it may not be. But no, the train operators have blamed the wrong kind of sunlight. I mean, brilliant, isn't it?
And finally, my one is King Charles. It's good to see him out and about because we're seeing him out and about. It's lovely, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. But now it's time for my final, which is clickbait. And today, Danny, do you recognise this guy? Have a look. Oh, that's Danny.
That's me.
That is you. There's a picture, if you're listening on the radio, there's Danny in his WN radio days with two people either side of you. Do you recognise any of those people either side of you?
No, I can't. Look how handsome I am. But no, I'm slightly thinner.
Oh, you look as though you've got a beard. Did you have a slight beard?
I may have had some stubble.
Yeah, so that is Danny Kelly in his radio days.
Wow.
You know, somebody sent me that on Facebook, because I have a little Facebook page, and somebody sent me that.
Who was it?
So I thought, well, it was your friend. He said hi to Danny. He used to appear on your show providing a finance show. Do you not remember his name?
No, we used to have many sorts of contributors. I can't remember.
Finance.
Are putting him on the post.
I can't remember.
He's forgotten you, Peter.
Well, Peter who?
Hunt. Peter Hunt, yeah.
Oh, Peter!
You don't remember?
Of course I know who Peter is.
Do you
Peter
remember
Hunt?
Peter?
Listen, I used to have so many contributors.
Right.
But I remember Peter was excellent.
God, this has gone down like a sack of lead balloons, really.
Well, it just shows that he wasn't given any warning. I mean, Danny had no idea that. I had no idea, obviously,
but it's great to hear from him again. And he's obviously followed GB News, and he's a fan of GB News, which is great. So many people in the Midlands are your number one fan.
I love the ways you tracked it now to turn it into a compliment. So
it is. It should be a compliment.
It evaporates that Peter sent a picture of
just
himself.
Deflected
You
from.
didn't even remember
who the hell he was. No. It's great to hear from him again.
Yes, Peter. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Peter.
They sent that to my little Facebook page. So thank you very much, Peter. Lovely picture of Danny looking slightly more svelte than he does now, but he still looks good.
If anyone's got any ghastly pictures of me in the past, do not send them to Nana, please.
I've actually got one myself. We actually look good in. But listen, on today's show, I've been asking, would you volunteer to police our borders? And according to our Twitter poll, 69%, 69.9%, so let's round it up to 70% of you say yes, and 30% of you say no, they wouldn't. Well, I would absolutely police our borders. I'm more than happy to do that. I'll do it as a volunteer. I'd volunteer and have a volunteer day that I do it, maybe.
You'd want your expenses, though, wouldn't you?
Make it a day out, take a bottle or two.
You'd want your expenses, Miss Akua.
Well, listen, thank you so much to my panel. Author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Christine, thank you so much.
Pleasure, as always.
Broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Thank you, Danny. And a huge thank you to you for joining me today. Lovely to see you. I'll see you next week, same time, same place, 3 o'clock on Saturday. I'll leave you with the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. The next few days, the theme really is clear spells and showers around, and we have that really as we end Sunday as well. Showers pushing their way in from the west, quite frequent for some western districts. Some clearer spells, though, further towards the east, and a much drier night overall, though, for the far northeast here in Shetland. It is going to be a much wetter one with that band of rain sweeping through. Underneath some of those clear spells, though, temperatures will just drop off a bit. Low single figures for many of us, and a patchy frost is possible first thing on Monday morning. Maybe some icy stretches as well, where we do have those showers around. We will continue to see those showers pushing their way in. They will be most frequent and heaviest for northwestern areas. Some quite blustery winds around here at times also, but generally further east and south, you'll more likely stay dry throughout the day with a decent number of sunny spells in there as well. A relatively pleasant start to the new week. Temperatures around 6 to 11 degrees Celsius is pretty much where we'd expect them to be for this time in the year. On Tuesday, got an area of low pressure just to the north that will again bring some very breezy, blustery showers for Scotland, but a ridge of high pressure allows for a drier, finer start for much of Northern Ireland, England and Wales, with some sunny spells once again. But we will start to see the cloud thickening up from the southwest, with outbreaks of rain eventually arriving, turning breezier as well. But in amongst all of this, we have milder air sweeping its way in, so temperatures will be on the rise as we head towards the middle part of the week, seeing mid-teens for some of us as we head towards Wednesday. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.